Lord Brocktree, written and read by Jacques. For 2 long seasons, the Badger Lord of Salamandastron, Rossano, had been working on a history of the mountain. On the very day that he completed the tale, all the hares on Salamandastron gathered to hear him read it to them. That night, the dining hall was packed to capacity as Rossano began to speak. Salamandastron's history goes back further into the mists of time than even I would dare to guess. But the mountain as we know it today is due mainly to the work of one creature, Lord Brocktree of Brockhall. I have recorded the history of his early years as faithfully as I could. Now I will tell you the story. Hopelessness and an air of foreboding had cast their pall over land, sea, and the mountain of Salamandastron. Yet no beast knew the cause of it. A pale moon of early spring touched each wind-driven wave-top with flecks of cold silver as breakers crashed endlessly upon the strand. In his chamber, overlooking the scene, Lord Stonepaw sat in his great chair, feeling as ancient as the mountain he ruled. Drawing his cloak tight against vagrant night chills, the once mighty Badger Lord squinted rheumily out to sea. Without bothering to knock, a venerable hare creaked his way into the chamber, leaning heavily upon a small serving cart which he was pushing before him. Stonepaw shook his head at the sight of the food his servant was laying out on the small table at his side. "Leave me alone, Fleetscut. I'll have it later." "No, you won't, sir. You'll flippin' well have it now. I ain't going to the bother of lugging victuals from Blench's kitchen to watch you let 'em go cold." The hare perched on his chair arm, helping himself to soup and bread in the hope that it might encourage his master's appetite. Stonepaw snorted. "Look at us, me Stonepaw, hardly able to hold a spoon with the same paws that used to lift huge boulders, and you, Fleetscut, doddering around with a trolley." Fleetscut hauled himself from the chair arm and went to lean at the long window overlooking the sea. "Every beast has to grow old. We've had a long and good life, you and me, fought our battles, protected the western coast against all comers. There's been peace now, for as long as any creature on the mountain can remember. What are you worrying about, sire?" Stonepaw stared out at the darkened waters. "Peace has gone on too long. Something inside me says that trouble, such as these shores have never known, is headed our way. Where do you suppose all the birds have gone? The skies are usually thick with them in late spring." Fleetscut shrugged. "Who knows what goes on in the mind of a seabird?" The badger smiled at his faithful old friend. "Leave me now. I'll talk to you on the morrow. There are things I must do." Fleetscut had never questioned his Badger Lord's authority. Bobbing a stiff bow, he left the chamber, pushing his trolley. Lord Stonepaw made his way to the secret chamber, where countless other Badger rulers of Salamandastron had gone to dream mysterious dreams. From his own lantern, Stonepaw lit 3 others. Then, taking a pawful of herbs from a shelf, he sprinkled them into the lantern vents. As the sweet-smelling incense of smoke wreathed him, he sat down upon a carved rock throne and let his mind take flight. "If the gates of dark forest lie open for me soon, if the shadow of evil darkens our western shores, who will serve in my stead? My young warriors are scattered, questing afar for adventure. Only the old guard are left, dim of eye and feeble of limb." Lord Stonepaw's eyes began flickering, and the herbal smoke swirled about his great silver head. "Where is the strongest of the strong? Is there a badger roaming the earth, brave and mighty enough to become Lord of Salamandastron?" Outside on the strand, the gale increased. Like a maddened beast the ocean roared. A foreboding of great evil lay over the land and sea, but no beast knew the cause of it, yet. In the northeast reaches of Mossflower Wood, a traveller had walked straight into trouble. Drig Slopmouth and his brood, 13 in all, nasty, vicious stoats every one. The only work they'd done that day was to lie in wait for an unsuspecting wayfarer, a lanky, carefree young hare, known to her friends as Dotty. The realization that she was surrounded by Drig and his band of robbers did not seem to upset her unduly. "Good morning, chaps and chapesses. Not a bad old sort of day for the time of season, what?" A snigger arose from the stoats. "Look at what we caught, Drig, a posh rabbit." Dotty rounded on the speaker, a fat, frowsy female. "Incorrect, my old stoatess. I'm a hare, not a rabbit. Now say it correctly after me. Look at what we caught, Drig, a posh hare." Drig stepped between them, pointing to the travelling haversack swinging from the young hare's paw. "Empty your bag on the ground." Dotty smiled sweetly at him. "Oh, I'd rather not, sir. It'd take me half the day to get the jolly old thing repacked, what?" A large, dim-looking stoat, Drig's eldest son, pushed forward. "Just show us what's in the bag." "The bag? Here, you take it." Dotty swung the bag hard. There was a cracking noise as it struck the stoat's head, laying him out flat. She wailed upon the others, laying about her with a bag left and right, leaping and kicking out fiercely with powerful, rangy footpaws. From the shelter of a broad beach nearby, another traveller watched the melee. He chuckled quietly. The young hare seemed to be doing fine, when suddenly Drig caught her footpaws in a noose. The hare-maid was yanked off balance and floored as 3 stoats leapt on her back. The watcher decided it was time to step in. Drig screeched in terror as he was lifted into the air and used as a swatter to knock the other stoats willy-nilly. Dotty scrambled upright, swinging her bag, but there was no beast to strike. Vermin lay everywhere, those still conscious moaning aloud, nursing their injuries. Drig still hung, half-dazed, from the paw of a mighty male badger. The huge creature tossed Drig aside like a discarded wash-rag and nodded sternly at the hare-maid. "I've been watching you a while from behind yon beach. For a young un, you were doing well, until they came at you from behind. If I'd thought you could have taken them single-pawed, I wouldn't have stepped in. By the way, my name's Lord Brocktree. What do they call you, miss?" The hare-maid did an elegant leg, half bow, half curtsy. "Dorothea Duckfontaine Dilworthy, at your service, sir, but I'm generally called Dotty. What do we do with this covey of curmudgeons, my lord?" With a fearsome swish, Lord Brocktree drew his great battle-sword. It was almost as tall as himself, with a blade wide as 2 dock leaves. A moan of fear arose from the stoats. "I save my sword for proper combat with real warriors. Scum such as you would only dishonour its blade. But I will make exceptions if any of you are still within my sight by the time I've counted to 3. 1... Dotty was bowled over in the mad scramble. Before the badger lord had counted further, Drig Slopmouth and his wicked brood had vanished. Dotty chuckled. "Pity I didn't have a sword like this one. How do you handle a weapon like this?" For answer, the badger twirled his sword in a warrior's salute and stowed it one-pawed across his broad back. "Strength, I suppose. They say I was born even stronger than my father, Lord Stonepaw." "My curse has always been beauty," said Dotty. "They say I was born more beautiful than the setting sun at solstice. That's probably what made those blinking stoats attack me. Some beasts take beauty as a sign of weakness. I say, did you mention that Lord Stonepaw's your pater?" Brocktree retrieved his travelling bag from behind the beach. "Why, do you know of him?" Dotty scuffed the dust with her foot-paw. "I should bally well say so. I'm being sent to his blinking old mountain. What you call it?" "Salamandastron?" "Aye, that's the place. My Aunt Blench is the chief cook there. I believe she's a right old battle-axe." Lord Brocktree sensed the story behind Dotty's remarks. Seating himself with his back against the beech tree, he unpacked provisions from his bulky haversack. "Sit down here by me, Dotty. Do you like oatcakes, cheese, and elderflower cordial?" The hare-maid plonked herself willingly on the grass. "Rather. I haven't eaten for absolute ages. Almost an hour, I think. That cheese looks good." Well, help yourself, and we'll exchange our stories. You first. Tell me, why are you being sent to Salamandastron?
Well, sir, was it one bally thing or another, I was always in trouble back home. If a confounded pie went missing from a windowsill, or some beast had been at the cider store, guess who got the blinking blame? Me. Anyhow, just after Grandpa's whiskers went afire and some villain tore the seat out of Uncle Septimus's breeches, my dear old parents made a decision. Here, cast your lordly peepers over this little scrawl. Dotty dug a tattered bark cloth letter from her arm bag. Brocktree's dark eyes twinkled with amusement as he read it. Dear Sister Blench, Cramsey and I can no longer put up with Dorothea, so I am sending her to you. Your Badger Lord has our permission to deal with the wretch as he sees fit, short of slaying her. You also may do likewise. Please keep her captive upon your mountain until such time as she is civilized enough to live among decent creatures. Teach her to cook and other domestic skills. Please write to let me know she has arrived safely, and if she does not return by winter, I will take it that she has settled down to her new life. Cramsey sends his love to you, Blench. I remain your devoted sister, signed, Daphne Duckfontaine Dilworthy. Brocktree had to turn his head aside and wipe his eyes on a spotted handkerchief to keep from laughing. Dotty, surmising that he was wiping away tears, nodded sympathetically. Sad, ain't it, sir? The woeful tale of a fatal beauty. I say, did you get chucked out by your parents too? The Badger Lord patted his young friend's paw. No, 'twas nothing like that, Dotty. I was restless, just like all Badger Lords before me. It grieved me to leave behind my young son, Boar the Fighter, I named him. But it's a fact that two male badgers can't live together in peace, especially Badger Lords. So I had to observe the unwritten law. I left Brockhall and began roaming to follow my dream. Dotty carefully stowed the letter back in her bag. Beg pardon, sir, but what dream is that? Brocktree unshouldered his battle blade and began whetting its edge on a smooth rock, even though it looked keen as a razor. A vision I see in my mind's eye, a mountain that once shot forth flames and molten rock, older than time itself, its fires now gone, waiting, always waiting for me on the shores of a great ocean. I couldn't describe the way to Salamandastron, for that's what I know the mountain is called, nor could I draw a map of the route, but something in my very heart is guiding me there. Dotty interrupted perkily. Oh, super-duper, sir. I'm glad you know the flipping way. I haven't got a confounded clue, only that it's someplace down on the western shores. Oh, beg pardon, sir. Didn't mean to butt in on you. Bad form. What? Brocktree smiled at his young companion and ruffled her ears indulgently. We'll find it together, young'un. It was an hour past dawn. Stiffen a medic, an old boxing hare, was just completing his daily exercise on the sands when his scarred ears picked up an unfamiliar sound. A narrow sailing boat, its sails furled, was being rowed in by a dozen big rats, their fur dyed dark blue. A cloaked figure stood at its prow as it cut through the sea mist. Its keel scraping on the sand, the craft nosed up onto the beach. Shipping their oars, the rats silently piled out and threw themselves prone upon the wet sand. Without a glance at them, the gowned and cowled figure used them as a bridge to reach dry land without wetting its elegantly shod footpaws. Stonepaw was back in his living quarters when Fleetscut ambled in and bowed stiffly. I think the trouble we were talking about has finally arrived, my lord. Somebody's to see you down at the shore entrance. The heavily robed figure of the Grand Fragall stood immobile as Lord Stonepaw with a retinue of 4 hares appeared. He pointed a great gnarled paw at the cloaked one. Who are you, and why do you trespass upon the western shore with armed soldiers? Removing the cowl of her cloak, the hooded one revealed herself. She was a blue-furred ferret wearing a nose ring from which hung a gold sickle hook amulet. I am Grand Fragol to Ungatron, ruler of the earth. He has given me permission to deliver his message to you." Drawing a scroll from her robe, the ferret read aloud. "The days of Ungatron are here. All of these lands and the seas that skirt them are from here on in his property. You have until nightfall to vacate this place. This is the will and the law of Ungatron, he who holds the power to make the stars fall from the sky and the earth to tremble. Obey or die." "Tell whatever lunatic scum you serve," said the badger, "that Lord Stonepaw of Salamandastron is accustomed to the blowing of windbags, as your master will find to his cost if he dares to land here. Now get out of my sight and take those blue-painted idiots with you." Wordlessly, the ferret and her soldiers retreated to their boat and rowed off into the mists. The interior of Ungatron's stateroom resembled the stuff of which nightmares are made. Huge cobwebs festooned every corner, set a-quiver by fat, hairy forms, which scuttled back and forth after the flies that buzzed everywhere. Carefully avoiding the webs, the Grand Fragol made her way to the cabin's centre and prostrated herself, face down, with one paw raised in the air. Two other creatures sat in silence watching her. One, a small silver-faired fox, its growth stunted by some terrible accident. This was Grodil, High Magician to Ungatron. Ungatron dressed like any plain fighter, chain-mail tunic, 2 iron bracelets, and a mail-fringed steel helmet surmounted by a spike. Yet any beast had only to look at him to see that here was a ruthless conqueror. Beneath the striped brow, the wildcat's fierce and black and gold eyes remained hooded and unblinking. He stared at the ferret stretched on his cabin floor. Then, turning his gaze aside, he nodded briefly to his magician. Grodil spoke. "Know ye that ye are in the presence of the mighty Ungatron, and that these are his days?" The Grand Fragol, still face down on the floor, called aloud the ritual answer required of her. "Though I dare not look upon his face, I know that Ungatron is here, and these are his days." Ungat replied, "So be it. Did you see my mountain? What took place there? Tell me all, and speak true." "O fearsome one," said the Fragol, "I saw your mountain, though I was not invited inside. It is called Salamandastron, just as you said. The place is defended by inferior species, ruled by an old striped dog called Lord Stonepaw. He said many insulting things, but mainly he said it would be to your cost if you dared to land upon his shores. I followed your orders, O Ungatron, and not stopping to bandy words with the striped dog or his creatures, I returned to you immediately." Ungat's hooded eyes fixed on the ferret sprawled near his footpaws. "You did well, my Fragol. You may rise and go now." When the ferret had departed, Ungat poured wine into a goblet fashioned from the bleached skull of a long-dead otter. "Read me the prophecy again, Grodil." Hastily sorting out a scroll, the fox unrolled it. "Find the mountain, slay its lord, put his creatures to the sword. These are the days of Ungatron, his reign of terror has begun." "But what about the badger lord?" said the wildcat. The magician fox shrugged and went back to studying his scrolls. "The striped dog is as your Fragol described, an old one. He should be no trouble to the mighty Ungatron." The wildcat leaned on the desk, bringing his face close to the fox. "My dreams do not contain any doddering ancient striped dog. The one who disturbs my slumbers is a badger of middle seasons, with the mark of a warrior stamped on him. So, my withered friend, explain that to me." Grodil removed his eyeglasses and began wiping them. "This badger you see might be just that, a dream." Ungat returned to his chair, stroking his fangs. "You'd better hope for your sake that he is, Grodil." "Don't look over the other side of the stream," said Dotty, "but there's some beast in there watching us." Brocktree winked at her and spoke out very loud and clear.
I'll look further down the bank for some dock leaves." He strode off, disappearing round a bend. Dotty sat dangling her foot-paws in the cool current. The peace was short-lived. Amid sudden howls, the overhanging willow seemed to explode in a shower of leaves and twigs as two burly forms crashed heavily into the water, and Lord Brocktree felt himself borne underwater by an adversary of tremendous power. As soon as his paws touched bottom, Brocktree thrust upward with a powerful shove. As both beasts broke the surface, the badger was aware of thudding blows raining on his opponent as Dotty yelled, "Get off! I'll pound your blinking head to a jelly if you don't let him go and jolly well fight fair." The beast wrapped around Brocktree's head roared, "Fair? You call 2 to 1 fair?" The otter, for it was a fully grown male of that species, stood up dripping in the shallows. "Shame on you, ambusher!" Dotty waded over and placed herself between both creatures. "Stab me if he ain't right, sir. It was you who attacked him first." "Hi there, miss," said Brocktree. "Whose side are you on?" The otter sat down in the shallows, chuckling. "Ha! Now, yous two, stop all your argufying and tell me, do you like water shrimp and hot root soup? I've got a pan of it on the go." At the mention of food, Dotty immediately felt friendly. "I've never tasted it, but I'm sure I like it, sir." The otter waded over, paw outstretched. "Don't sir me, young'un. I goes by the name of Roughgar Brookbach. You can call me Rough, though. Rough by name, rough by nature. That's what my old grandma used to say when I wrestled her." Dotty looked at him in surprise. "You used to wrestle with your old grandma?" Rough grinned. "Aye, but she always beat the daylights out of me. Come on, hearties, follow me." Further upstream, they came upon Rough's camp. There was a slow-burning turf fire on the bank edge, and a long flat elm trunk floating in the water, which served as his boat. Rough attended to a cauldron of soup bubbling on the fire. Dipping in a wooden ladle, he sampled it gingerly. "Ha! All right and ready. This is the stuff to put a shine on your fare and a glint in your eye. Good old hot root." After the meal, they lay about on the bank. Dotty and Brocktree told Rough their stories. "Dotty and I need to get down to the shores of the Great Sea," said the Badger Lord. "Best way to do that is to follow waterways, as well you know. It'd be nice if we could go by boat instead of all that trekking by paw. Suppose you came with us." Rough's rudder-like tail thwacked down upon the bank, propelling him upright, grinning from ear to ear. No sooner said than done. Silently, with furled sails, ships drifted in on the flood tide. Ships upon ships upon ships. Craft of every description, from single to four-masted, flat-bottomed, deep-keeled, bulky and sleek, large and small. Then came the blue hordes of Ungatrun from north and south, marching along the shores, the sounds of their footpaws muffled in the soft sands, in columns 50 deep and 50 long, following their commanders. Starlight glinted dully off armour, spear-tip, blade and arrowhead as they came, closing in on Salamandastron like the jaws of a giant pincer. Flanked by 20 soldiers, Ungatrun strode up to the rocky fortress, his only illumination a torch held in the paws of Grodil. The wildcat's keen eyes flicked up to the long open rectangle of Stonepaw's room. There stood the Badger Lord of Salamandastron, clad in war armour, holding an enormous javelin. "So, you are still here, Striped Dog?" called Ungatrun. The reply was immediate. "Aye, to the death, Striped Cat." The wildcat's fangs showed in a sneer of derision. "So be it. 'Twill be your death, not mine. You have left it too late to retreat from the mountain as I commanded you to do. Now you must reap the penalty." Then, turning his back on Lord Stonepaw, the wildcat marched off back to his ship. The Badger Lord turned to his faithful retainer. "Fleetscut, have you still got the ability and wind to be called a runner?" "Suppose I could still kick up a bit of dust, my lord," said the ancient hare. "Why?" Stonepaw lowered his voice to a whisper. "Good creature, I want you to draw field rations and leave this mountain within the hour. Go where you will, but use your wits. Search out our young wandering warriors and any bands of hares about the countryside, young ones with a touch of warrior's blood in their eye. We need help as we've never needed it. Find them and bring them back to Salamandastron as fast as you can." Fleetscut bowed dutifully as he flexed his paws. "I'll give it a jolly good try, sire." Lord Stonepaw hugged his old friend briefly. "I know you will, you old grass-walloper. Good luck." Fleetscut ranged east to begin with. Then sweeping back west in a great arc, he searched hills, flatlands, valleys and cliff tops, finally arriving back on the shores somewhere north of Salamandastron. Slumping down on the beach, he unslung a small pack and began drinking some cold mint tea. Like an angry wasp, a barbed arrow buzzed by the hair, nicking his ear and burying itself in the sand. A small patrol, 10 rats from the great blue hordes, emerged from the dunes behind Fleetscut. "Stop there!" shouted their officer. "Move and you die!" With blood trickling from his ear, Fleetscut took off as only a hare can. A small grove of pines appeared up ahead, seeming to offer a hiding place, but no matter how hard he ran, Fleetscut could not prevent the leading rat closing up on him. Chancing a backward glance, Fleetscut saw the rat preparing his spear for a throw. Next moment, there was a sound of a meaty thud. The rat fell poleaxed, his scream cut short by a slingshot. "Up with thy paws, Holden, quick!" Without thinking, Fleetscut rolled over and threw up his paws. A thick woven net enveloped him, and he grabbed tight as he was swung off his back into the branches above. A big rough-looking female squirrel with a loaded sling dangling from one paw winked at him. "Don't thee say a word now, Long-Ears. Be still." Sighting the rats entering the fair grove, she glared fiercely about her at 40-odd squirrels, similarly armed, concealed in the upper branches. "Take no prisoners. To the dark forest with them all." Thwack, thwack, thock, thud! In less time than it took to draw breath, the rat column was slain to a beast. Fleetscut strove to disentangle himself from the net. "Lend a paw here," he called down. The female squirrel and 2 equally big males bounded up and lowered the net expertly to the earth, where the others soon had Fleetscut free. Somersaulting neatly out of the tree, the big female landed lightly on her footpaws. Fleetscut bowed gravely to her. "Thanks for saving my life, Mom." She examined the dead rat's bow and arrows. "'Twasn't to save thy life we dropped 'em. Weapons and plunder, that's why we slew the long-tails. I'm called Jacques the Sling, and these are my tribe. Be you from the mountains south of here?" The hare nodded. "Aye, my name's Fleetscut." Jacques sat, her tail brush against a pine trunk. "You've got big trouble over there, Fleetscut. We've been watching blue vermin marching down coast for days, all headed for thy mountain. Did ye escape the mountain?" The old hare shook his head sadly. "No, I was sent out by Lord Stonepaw to scout up reinforcements, but there ain't a bally hare round here anymore. Don't suppose you'd fancy helping us out, Mom?" Jacques tossed a sling stone deftly from one paw to the other. "Nay, not I, nor my tribe, e'en though I pity thy plight, friend. Other creatures' troubles are their own, not ours. But that doesn't mean we don't show hospitality to guests. Come, rest a while and sup with us. We'll talk on the morrow." Rest was the last thought on Fleetscut's mind, but no sooner had he drunk half a beaker of mushroom soup than the vessel slipped from his paws and he went into a deep slumber. Morning and noontide came and passed, and it was evening when Fleetscut wakened. "Where is Jacques?" he asked. Beddle, one of the other squirrels, placed food before the hare. "She'll be back by dark o' night. You must wait. Jacques will have news of thy mountain. What has taken place there?" When he'd satisfied his hunger and thirst, Fleetscut lay back and fell into a doze. Midnight had long gone when Jacques the Sling arrived back at the pines. She sat panting and sipping at a flask of elderberry wine. "Our hare sleeps yet, eh?" Ruro fed the fire with a dead pine log. "He wakened earlier, ate like a mad beast, then fell asleep again. Shall I wake him?" The squirrel leader put aside her wine. "Nay, let him sleep on. There's naught but bad news to hear when he wakens." "The mountain of Salamandastron has fallen, then?" Jacques warmed her paws by the fire. Aye, 'tis conquered by the blue ones. I could not get too near, but I saw from a distance some vermin scaling the slopes. They carried large new banners to put up there. 'Tis a sad day for these western coasts, Ruro. By the time the squirrel camp was up and about, Fleetscott was standing against a pine trunk, a plate of food lying at his footpaw untouched. Jacques still sat watching him. There was naught any beast could have done, Fleetscott. Come now, eat. I hear tell that thou art a beast with great appetite. A kick from the hare's footpaw sent the plate flying. I don't eat with cowards. Jacques sprang up, a loaded sling automatically in her paw. No beast calls Jacques the sling a coward. The old hare tore his tunic open, exposing his scrawny chest. Then kill me, Jacques, go on. See how long you and your band can hide out in this pine grove until Ungat Trun's blue hordes found you all. Then you'll wish you'd helped to fight against him and save Salamandastron. The squirrel stood before him, her wild eyes blazing. I'll prove to thee that me and mine aren't cowards. We'll go with thee on thy search. Aye, I'll help ye build an army, hares, or any other creature crazy enough to go against the hordes on yonder mountain. Then we'll fight them. Us for the taking of weapons which we value so highly, and thou for thy vengeance on the foes who slew thy brothers. Aye, Jacques the Sling, do not do this out of comradeship for ye. War is a business. I do it for profit, for all the weapons my tribe may plunder if victory is ours. Hare and squirrel stood face to face, their wrathful eyes searing one another. Fleetscott curled his lips scornfully. Do it for whatever reason you like, Brushtail, but do it. Jacques marched them ruthlessly all through that day. Where's she taken us? Asked Fleetscott. Ruro pointed to the northeast. To the Rockwood. Jacques will want words with Udara Groundslay. But enough talk, friend. Save your breath for travelling. The sun beat down without respite, and not even a breeze stirred the brownish scrub grass. In the late afternoon, Fleetscott stumbled and fell. Before any beast had noticed, Ruro heaved him up, set him back on his stick, and supported his other side. The old hare gritted his teeth as he stumbled onward at the rear of the tribe. Ruff the Otter called his friends onto the bank. Brocktree, come here, mates. I want you to meet my pal Rog, the best cook on this or any other stream, and the smartest turned-out mole on or under the earth. Rog doffed his hat gallantly, bowing his velvety head. Good day to Ezra and miss. Nice to meet ye, I'm sure. Dotty leapt lightly ashore and curtsied nicely. Boer, good day to Ezra, Rog. Stan on my tunnel, but you an handsome girt beast, her I. Rog threw up his big digging claws in surprise. Brr, you speaky mole speak. Very good, miss. Where did he learn it? Dotty answered in the quaint mole dialect. My old mum's mole chum, Blossom Bun. She'm taught it to I when I were a hinfant, boer I. Blossom Bun, do he say, miss? She'm be's my hanty, twice removed on my grandmum's side. Rog Longladle's dwelling was a marvellous cavern beneath the roots of a great beech. Lord Brocktree gazed about wistfully. This place puts me in mind of my old home Brockhall, very much so. Don't suppose I'll ever see it again. Ruff patted the badger's broad back. Same as me and Dotty. Don't be sad, mate. We're good friends, and both with ye. Amid the alcoves of thick down-growing roots, Dotty sat herself in a comfortable old armchair. Moles kept scurrying by to introduce themselves to the hare who could speak their dialect. Rog appeared, dabbing at his brow with a dock leaf which he used to shoo the moles off with. Gur, be offen with ee trouble, girl o' Burkle plug. You uns leave ee gentle beast to rest a while. Come and help I in ee kitchen if nee wants victuals to be ready sooner. And be washing ee paws first. Left to themselves, the three travellers took their ease, Brocktree and Ruff stretching out on the mossy ledge. Dotty sprawled comfortably in the armchair, letting tempting aromas from the kitchen hover about her. She sighed. What a pleasant place, a real home. Ungat Trun, sat closeted in his humid stateroom while his officers led his blue hordes against Salamandastron. He watched the spiders scuttling across their silky gossamer webs, pursuing flies, trapping them, and finally sucking the life from their victims' bodies. Spiders were savage, independent, and deadly. Ungat liked them. One thing, however, was troubling his mind. The striped dog who bestrode his dreams, big, strong, and forbidding. Now, when Ungat's eyes closed, he saw the phantom badger looming larger, surrounded by an ever-growing presence. The signs were there. This striped dog was gathering an army about him. Ungat closed his eyes tightly and spoke aloud, trying his utmost to concentrate his thoughts on the big striped dog who haunted the corridors of his mind. "Come, show your face to me. Come to my mountain and meet with your fate. I am Ungatron, the fearsome beast. You will die by my paw the day you look upon my face." Outside on the afterdeck, Grodil and the Grand Fagol were leaning on the stern rail, watching Salamandastron fall to the blue hordes, who broke upon it like the never-ending waves of the sea. Ungatron prowled sinuously out onto the deck, his plain war armor accentuating the size and strength of a fully grown male wildcat. His slitted eyes flicked shorewards before turning to the pair. "How goes the conquest of my mountain?" Grand Fragol replied in a usual monotone. "You will be enthroned within it by nightfall, O shaker of the earth. Already they are battering down its gates." The wildcat strode to the rail, both creatures following in his wake. "Bring a boat. We will go ashore." Lord Stonepaw knew defeat was inevitable. Against frighteningly overwhelming odds, his hares had put up a gallant battle, but to no avail. Stiffen the medic had fought his way up to the high-level chambers, where the Badger Lord and his remaining warriors had retreated. Ignoring a deep slash in his paw, the fighting hare threw a salute to Stonepaw. "We're cut off from the rest, sir. Bungworthy's command were cut to pieces trying to hold the main gate. Old Bungworthy was standing up to his scut in slain blue uns, yelling eulalias and hacking at wave after wave of the scum, but they kept on coming. He went down just as I made it to the main stairs. Seasons rest his brave memory." Stonepaw's shattered lance fell to the floor. "Did you see any of Salier's command on the second level?" Stiffener wiped tears from his eyes. "They was taken, Lord, surrounded and beaten. One of them thought he'd stuck me with a blade, but I only got cut on me paw and side. They dashed off then, carrying torches to search the chambers for more prisoners. That's when I escaped and made it up here, sire. We'd best do something quick afore they come." Ever gallant, the hare called Throby drew his blade. "We'll hold him at the stairhead. Maybe we won't last long, but we'll take a tidy few of the villains with us." Stonepaw plucked the blade from Throby's grasp. "No, listen to me. If we're dead, then Salamandastron's completely lost. There are secret passages that lead down to the cellar caves. We'd never be found down there. At least we'd be alive until help arrives in one form or another. Come on." 18 hares, the pitiful remainder of the mountain's old guard, were left to follow Lord Stonepaw. They filed after him, with his final words ringing in their ears. "At least, where there's life, there's hope, my friends." Evening skies rimmed the western horizon with fiery scarlet as the sun dipped to the wine-dark seas, and still no birds were heard or seen. Ungatron had the Badger Lord's great chair brought out from the dining hall onto the beach, where he sat watching black smoke wreathe from the rock-carved windows, whilst his officers made their reports. The numbers of those captured and slain did not please the wildcat. 72 dead and 60 captured. I make that 132 in all. Our scouts who watched the mountain reported at least 150 of those old hares. Then there's another matter, my malformed magician. Where's the Badger Lord Stonepaw? He must still be alive inside that mountain with a faithful few around him. Did no beast have the sense to think of that? I want that badger here, flat on his muzzle in front of me, and the last of his hairs, alive or dead. Find him, Grotto. Take some horde beast with you. Search every crack or hiding place inside that mountain, but find him. Now get out of my sight. Stone broadened his hairs and encountered no beast on their journey down to the network of caverns beneath Salamandastron. Holding tight to the ancient bramwell, Blench the cook waved her ladle in the Stygian blackness. She heard it clicking on rock both sides of her, and guessed that they were passing through a narrow tunnel. Wisely she ducked ahead. "Wait here, all of you. I'll be back in a moment." The hares obeyed their lord's command, huddling together in the dark. Then up ahead there was a chinking sound of steel striking flint. In an instant the area was flooded with light. Lord Stonepaw loomed up, a blazing torch creating a red-gold aura around him. Gratefully, they shuffled along in the badger's wake. "Now, through here. 'Twas a bit of a squeeze for me, but you hares shouldn't find it too difficult." Emerging one by one from the narrow gap, the hares greeted the sight that met their eyes with gasps of surprise. They were in a medium-sized cavern, with a pool at its centre, which threw off a pale luminescent green aura. Water dripping from white limestone stalactites plopped gently into the pool. The Badger Lord called them all to sit in a semicircle around him. "Right, Council of War. What weapons do we have, Stiffener?" The boxing hare had his estimate ready. "4 light rapiers, bows and arrows, 8. Full quivers too. No more than half a dozen javelins. But every beast carries a sling, and there ain't a shortage of stones hereabouts. Oh, 8 daggers and Blench's ladle. That's the lot, sir." Stonepaw mused over the situation before speaking. If we're going to get out, we'd best make it soon. I'll guarantee that Ungatron is having the mountains searched stone by stone for me right now. If we linger down here, we'll have to face a fight to the death, or capture and slavery. Blench dipped a ladle into the pool and drank. "So, Lord, let's get going right away. Do you know the way out?" Stonepaw shook his massive striped head. "I haven't got a single clue. Have any of you? Maybe an old ballad or poem might hold the answer. Let's put our thinking caps on." Hours passed, interspersed by the dropping of water into the great central pool and the odd sigh from a hare who could see no answer to the problem. Lord Stonepaw kept his silence, knowing there was no solution available. They were imprisoned inside their own mountain, and likely to perish miserably down in its cellars. Dotty vowed to herself that she could not touch another morsel that night. Then she relented, and set about nibbling candied lilac buds from the edges of an almond cake. Rog Longladle was surely a master of victuals, unequalled at baking, boiling, grilling, or cooking any edible his moles could find. The haremaid watched Lord Brocktree, digging into a huge bowl with a wooden ladle, his cheeks bulging as he ate. "Well, pickle me ears, sir. You look pleased enough with that." The badger grinned wolfishly over another ladleful. "Scrumptious, miss. The moles call it deeper'n ever turnip and tater and beetroot pie. I could eat it all night." Ruff took his nose out of a foaming tankard, still half filled with chestnut and buttercup beer, and chortled as he blew froth from his upper lip. "Ha! Ain't it true, though? I'd never have left home if I'd got vills of this quality. Rog, ye old oven dog, give us another of your kitchen ditties." Brandishing his oversized ladle and smiling from ear to ear, the good mole beckoned the little Dibbons to take their dancing places. Brisk as bumblebees and plump as robins, the tiny mole babes formed 2 facing lines. Rog's wife scraped out the opening bars on an old fiddle, and all the watchers started tapping their paws in time as the little ones danced furiously, twirling and whirling, smocks, tunics, and aprons billowing. It was the funniest sight, all those tiny Dibbons, bowing, leaping, touching noses, kicking up their paws, whooping in their gruff small voices. Rog sat down next to Dotty, rattling his digging claws on the tabletop as he watched the antics of the mole babes. "They'm lovely little dancers, sure enough, miss. Oh, I say, Rog, they must sleep like hogs in e beds arter all e whirly gigging." In truth, the Dibbons did sleep well, But some time before the dawn hours, the entire mole household was roused by Brocktree. It was a nightmare, but clear as day, a swaying room decked with cobwebs and spiders, and flies buzzing everywhere. Tossing and turning in his sleep, the Badger Lord tried to rid his mind of the unbidden vision. Then suddenly, a great evil-looking wildcat appeared, its voice grating through him like a rusty blade. "Come, show your face to me. Come to my mountain and meet with your fate. I am Ungatron, the fearsome beast. You will die by my paw the day you look upon my face." When the Badger Lord recounted the scenes of his nightmare, Rog had something to say. "Wait ye, sir. Bide ye instant." He trundled off, returning shortly with another mole, very sturdy, with the look of Rog about him. "Listen ye, be my son Girth, him a born wanderer. Tell him what he seed, Girth." "Pleasure to meet ye, sirs, miss," said Girth. "'Bout 3 moons back I were roaming south and west o' yer. I waked one morn and seed ye Girth army o' vermints, all a-painted blue, tramping westward to ye sand shores. Them was a chanting like this. Each chief vermint he shouts, "Ungat," and t'others shout back, "Trun, trun, trun." It took a lot of persuading to stop Brocktree following the vermin instantly. In the end, he agreed that all of them, including Girth, would set off immediately after breakfast.
Udara Groundsley was a short-eared owl. Unfortunately, he'd been born without the gift of flight, but this didn't seem to worry him one little bit. He'd made his birthplace, the Rockwood, and its surrounding moors, his domain. Nothing moved or went on there that he didn't know about. Fleetscut sat with the squirrels around a small fire. It was almost twilight when the owl arrived. Jacques rose to greet him. "Thou art looking hale and fine of feather, Groundsley." Ruffling his brown and umber-barred feathers, the big owl stared solemnly at the squirrels with huge golden eyes, which shone in the reflected firelight. "Rookadoo! What brings bushtails to my lands?" Jacques politely let a moment elapse before replying. "We have brought a long-ears with us. He seeks news of his kind, or any other beast seen hereabouts." The owl closed both eyes and twitched his ear feathers gently. Fleetscut thought he had gone to sleep, but then the big golden orbs opened again. "Hum-a-rum-rum. There is a certain long-ears, a hare. They say he's a March hare, wild and perilous. I have not met him, I do not know. Many long-ears are gathering to him at a secret place. I have heard them whisper his name, King Bucko Big Bones. One of the long-ears dropped a piece of bark scroll. Reading is not part of my wisdom, and of no interest to me. That is all I have to say. You will be gone from my lands before noontide. Here is the writing. You may keep it." Lifting his left wing slightly with great effort, Udara allowed a small folded scroll to drop near the fire. Fleetscut pounced upon it before it rolled into the flames. Without a backward glance, Udara Groundsley, the flightless owl, ambled off to pursue his solitary existence. Jacques' tribe gathered round to hear what was on the scroll, as the old hare read aloud. 2 points north of dawn, find stone and shade and drink. Follow where no water runs. March on through 2 moons and suns. My sign you'll see, I think. Discover then a stream wolf's ford. Tug thrice upon the royal cord. Then my honour guard will bring loyal subjects to their king. Fleetscut's paw thwacked against the parchment. Tchah! The very idea of it, a hare promoting himself to king, the pollywoggle, and doubtless luring our young Salamandastran warriors to his side. Who does he think he is? What? Jacques couldn't help smiling at Fleetscut's indignation. "Canst thou solve any of this riddle poem, hare?" Fleetscut snorted. "Of course I canst, squirrel. Now let me see. 2 points north of dawn. That's a bit of a poser, ain't it?" Ruro provided the answer. "Dawn is in the east, where the sun rises. 2 points north of that is northeast. We must go northeast, methinks." Ungatron had now taken up residence in the mountain. He liked the view from Lord Stonepaw's chamber.
Sprawling on the bed, he sampled the badger's best mountain ale, whilst chewing a savoury cheese and onion flan from Blench's kitchen. A knock sounded on the door. At a nod from Ungat, the guard opened it. Grand Fragall glided in, standing to one side as the magician Groddle, Captain Swinch, and the Horde Rats Rotface and Grinach were ushered in by the stout Captain Thrall. The wildcat rose from the bed and circled the four slowly, his banded tail swishing as he noted their trembling paws. "I take it that the news is not good. Talk to me, Groddle." The stunted fox made his report. "Mightiness, we have searched through endless dark caves beneath your mountain. Alas, we found no trace of the striped dog or his creatures." Ungat leapt onto the window ledge and stood there, framed by the sky outside. "Who are these two Horde Rats? Why are they here?" The rats' heads shook uncontrollably as they rattled forth their concocted story to their fearsome master. "We were sent back for victuals by Captain Swinch, sire. Aye, and when we returned with them, the main search party wasn't there, mighty one, so we was sort of lost. Then all of a sudden we was surrounded. It was the striped dog and more than a score of those rabbits. We fought them like mad beasts. There was blood everywhere. Mightiness, there was too many of them. They stole the victuals and left us for dead, sire." Ungat's son was on the hapless pair like a hawk with two chickens. He shook both of them, snapping their necks. Then with a mighty heave he hurled the two carcasses out of the wide window onto the rocks below. He turned from the window ledge and stared impassively at Groddle and Swinch as though nothing had happened. "Tomorrow at first light you will return to your task. The striped dog is alive and hiding down there with his hares. He will not escape me because you will find him. And remember this, return empty-pawed, and you will wish you had died quickly like those two fools who stood lying barefaced in front of me." Swinch and Groddle retreated, bowing. "As you command, mightiness." Ungat waited until they had made it to the door. "Wait, Captain Thrall. Have these two staked out on the shore below where I may see them from this window. They are not to have food or water. Choose two strong soldiers to beat them with the flats of their own sword blades, and tell them to lay on hard. It will serve as a warning to my forces that no beast fails to carry out the orders of Ungat Thrun, not even a captain or a magician. They may be released at dawn tomorrow to continue their search." Ripfang and Doomeye, two new recruits, were chosen to administer the punishment. They stood over their staked-out victims, holding the swords high, looking up to the window. Ungat signalled that the beating should begin with a wave of his paw. Swish, thwack, swish, thwack. The sound of the flogging was soon drowned out by Swinch and Groddle's screams. Sunshaded, green and tranquil, the stream stretched lazily, meandering through the woodlands on this the questers' first full day together. Dotty and Gert sat up forward, chattering away in mole speech. Ruff and Brocktree were aft, paddling. In the early noon a water meadow appeared to the south. Dotty's keen ears soon picked up sounds from its far side. She called sternwards to Brocktree. "I say, sir, some cousin a jolly old hubbub going on over there. Shall we wander over and take a look? What?" The water meadow was extremely hard to negotiate. They were constantly shaking thick bunched weed and long water lily stems off the paddles. From the far side the sounds of urgent shouts and creatures thrashing about in the rushes echoed over the water. Then the pointed log prow broke through a reed bank, and the four travellers took in the scene at a glance. Several shrews were dancing in agitation, pointing wildly at the water. A tiny hedgehog was going down for the second time, splashing and gurgling. He was in deadly danger. Gliding smoothly towards the hog babe was a pike, its rows of needle-like teeth exposed as its jaws opened in anticipation. Dotty yelled out in dismay. "Look at the size of that brute! He'll crunch the little tyke in one bite, spikes and all." The shrews threw up their paws hopelessly. "He's a dead 'un, all right. Naught we can do now, mates." Gert tried to reach out with his paddle to the hog babe, but he was too far away. Then Ruff dashed the length of the log to gain momentum and leapt high, soaring over Gert and Dotty in a spectacular dive. Vegetation and spray flew everywhere as the big otter hit the water, purposely to divert the pike from its prey. Instead of swimming for the babe, Rough went like lightning at the fish and brought his powerful tail crashing against its flat fish's head. Brocktree, Dotty and Girth paddled furiously, and Girth hooked the hog babe's little belt with a digging claw and fished him on board. The pike fell back under Rough's assault, eyes glazing over. Then it ripped off into the depths, its voracious appetite unsated. Dropping her paddle for a moment, Dotty rummaged through one of the packs until she found a piece of material which she used as a towel. She handed it to the hog babe, and he draped it around his tiny body, muttering mutinously to himself, "Gone and got all wet now. Skickles didn't want a bath." No sooner did they touch the shore than Rough was surrounded by shrews clapping him on the back. "You beat the ribber wolf. You showed him. Let me shake your paw, warrior. I'm Log-a-Log Gren." Rough shook his paw heartily. "Pleased to meet you, Gren. Couldn't let the little un get et, so I had to tail-whop old River Wolf." "Ho-ho, and a fine job you did of it, mate. Come and take lunch with us. Beach that log and bring your friends." In the shrew camp, introductions were made all round, and Log-a-Log Gren said, "I want to thank you and your pals for rescuing Skickles. We found the little tyke wandering round a while back." The babe in question waved a severe paw under Gren's nose. "Me name's Skickles, not Skickles." Dotty attempted to help out by translating. "Oh, I see. Your name's Skiddles." The hog babe scowled darkly, huddling deeper into the towel. "Stupid rabbit. Me name not Skiddles, it's Skickles." Dotty tried another alternative. "You say your name's Skittles?" He smiled patronisingly at her, as if the message had finally got over. "That's right, Skickles." Dotty narrowed her eyes. "If you ever call me Rabbit again, or even Rabbit, I'll tan your tail bright red. So, how do you feel about that, Master Skittles, what?" Skittles stumped off without another word. They lingered at the shrew camp until late evening, and finally accepted Gren's invitation to stay overnight. Even then, Rough and Girth had become such firm favourites that the shrews pleaded with them to extend their visit. Dotty liked being with the shrews, but Lord Brocktree took quite a bit of convincing that he should take a few days off from his quest. Finally, under the combined persuasive powers of his three friends, he yielded gruffly. The Badger Lord would not admit it, but he'd become very fond of the hog babe Skittles. They wandered the camp together, the tiny hedgehog seated astride the badger's sword hilt upon his friend's huge shoulders. Rough sat with Log-a-Log Gren, sampling shrew beer and watching Dotty and Girth practice wrestling holds. The hairmaid neatly tripped her instructor so that he fell sitting next to Rough. Girth smiled approvingly. "Miss Dot, she a good, clever wrestler, learns quicker than any beast I ever instructed. Burr I." Dotty sat with them, accepting a beaker of dandelion and burdock cordial from Gren. "Huh, don't listen to that fat fibber. I'm as sore as a peeled onion all over from being blinking well thrown by him." Gren poured cordial for Girth. "Mayhap you'll need his instructions if you're bound to follow Lord Brock to the mountain by the seas. From what he tells me, he sees visions of great trouble there." The shrew chieftain was gnawing her lips, staring off into space, when Rough nudged her. "Go on, Gren, say it. You wants to come with us, don't you?" She stood up and stretched before answering. "Gowsome shrews need something to do. We've been too long in one place. Aye, Rough, if you'll have us, the Gowsome are with you, all the way." All four clasped paws, and Girth asked the question which was puzzling him. "Why do we be called Gowsomes, marm?" Gren explained proudly about the shrew tradition. "Gowsome? Guerrilla Union of Shrews in Mossflower. That's what the letters of our name stand for. I'm called Log-a-Log because all shrew chieftains are. We're rovers, bold water beasts, and fierce warriors, sworn to uphold good and defeat evil. All Gowsome shrews are bound under oath to help one another in battle." Fleetscott's wild yells wakened the squirrels. Jacques rubbed irately at her eyes as she approached the dancing hare, Ruro hurrying to join her. "Look, there it is," shouted the old hare, "plain as the washing on me granny's line, just as it says in the confounded poem. March on through 2 moons and suns, my sign you'll see, I think. Well, there it is. Those two tall silverfirs yonder. Notice anything about them? What? They've had most of the lower boughs chopped away, and a thin dead trunk placed high on two notches atween them. That makes an H. Jacques nodded. Aye, 'tis true. Well done, Hare. Thou canst spell the name of thine own species. Ruro, break camp. We'll make for yonder sign straight away. They marched into the tree shade by mid-morn, ate their fill, and dozed in the pleasant green shade. Afternoon shadows were beginning to lengthen when Jacques stirred. She shook Ruro and Beddle. Best make a move before eventide. Which way now? Ruro retrieved the parchment of bark scroll, which was hanging from Fleetscott's tunic. It says here, Discover then a stream wolf's ford, tug thrice upon the royal cord. Where wouldst thou suppose that to be? Jacques judged by the sun shadows. Northeast has served us well thus far. We'll continue that way. Beddle, get them up on the paws. A ford means fresh water. That's good. None too gently she turned and roused the old hare with a few kicks of her footpaw. Waken thyself, windbag, or we leave you here. As Fleetscott came awake, a single-bladed hatchet suddenly thudded into the ground between him and Jacques. Instantly, the woodland was thick with hedgehogs. The squirrels were surrounded. The hog leader, a massive creature, made twice as big by the grass and leaves stuck to his quills as camouflage, strutted past Jacques and retrieved his hatchet. In the other paw, he carried a shield of toughened beech bark, studded with shells. Staring fiercely at the squirrels, he puffed himself out, cheek, stomach, and chest. Fleetscott tapped his quills politely. Excuse me, old lad. Rounding on him, the big hedgehog roared. Don't dare speak when Baron Druckle Spike Diggle has the floor, or you'll get yourself chopped up into frog meat, you will. A small, wiry female hogwife pushed away to the front. Grabbing the Baron's hatchet from his paw, she brandished it expertly, clipping the tip off one of his head spikes. The Baron deflated totally. Picking up the tip of his head spike, he chewed on it like a toothpick. Merkelwort, you're showing me up in front of my own rabble. He ducked as she swung the hatchet again. Show you up? Every time you open that great sap of yourn, you show yourself up, you breeze battle. Ask these creatures if they'd like some black currants and plum crumble. Go on, snit nose. Baron Drucko's offer was readily accepted by Fleetscott and the squirrels, and while they trooped after Drucko to the hog den, the old hare, well aware of where the ruling power in the tribe lay, made a wobbly though elegant leg to Merkelwort, offering his paw. Allow me to escort you, ma'am. A pretty hogwife should never jolly well walk alone, what? She accepted. Well then, ain't this grand? That husband of mine wouldn't give you a push off a rock. Baron Drucko's tribe were known as the rabble, and they lived in rabble conditions. However, neither Jacques nor Fleetscott could pretend that rabble blackcurrant and plum crumble was anything other than first class. The guests seated themselves on a rotten elm trunk and dug into sizable bowls of the stuff, steaming hot and covered in sweet maple sauce. You'll have to forgive us, remarked Merkelwort casually. The camp's a bit untidy. Jacques shifted to accommodate a beetle grubbing its way out of the rotten log they were seated on, and murmured to Fleetscott, The place looks like a battlefield in the midst of a midden. The area was littered with chopped-off head spikes, broken bowls, fruit and vegetable skins, and other debris far too dreadful to mention. Fleetscott coughed politely. Ahem. I take it you don't live hereabouts, then, ma'am. Merkelwort wiped spilled crumble from her lap with a withered dock leaf, which she then devoured. Oh, graciousness, no. We're only up here looking for our babe, little Skittles. The whiffling, wandering woggle spike here. I mean the darling infant hog went and got himself losted. Fleetscott chipped in. Actually, we met up with two hedgehog types a couple of days back. They found your babe, but the little tyke escaped from them and wandered off again, what? Some good beast should find them sooner or later. Don't you jolly well fret, folks. Baron Drucko succeeded in filching a bowl of crumble from a dozing rabble-mate, placing his empty bowl in the hedgehog's paws and digging into the fresh one. One of the reasons I wanted to come up this way was to enter the contest. Ha! I expect that's why you're wandering round this neck of the country too, eh? The old hare put aside his bowl. It was grabbed by a rabble hog, who began licking the inside of it thoroughly. Contest? What contest, Baron? First I've heard of it. Baron Drucho cuffed the sleeping hedgehog alongside him into wakefulness. "Give me that contest thing you found." An extremely grimy birch bark strip was thrust into the hare's paw. Wiping off remnants of bygone meals and a few unidentified smears, Fleetscut read aloud, "Come mother, father, daughter, son. I'll take on all or just the one. Aye, try to beat me and defeat me. Set 'em up, I'll knock 'em down. King Bucko Big Bones, where's the crown?" Jacques the Sling raised her eyebrows at the old hare. "Methinks Big Bones has a fine opinion of himself. Well, good luck to thee. Yon fellow must have the might to back up his challenge." Makelwort poked a grimy paw of Fleetscut. "Ha! So you're going to take up the challenge, eh? Don't you think you're a bit long in the tooth and seasons?" "Ma'am, I must accept the challenge if I'm to raise an army to take Salamandaston, for we need this Bucko Whatsit and his followers on our side. So I'll search old Big Chops out and throw down the bally gauntlet. What?" Drucho raised his dripping spikes from the pudding bowl. "Aye, me too. I'd take a whiffle at it. What do you say we join forces and see this King Bucko out together, hey? We ain't got a clue where to find him. What about you, Cully?" Without consulting Jacques, Fleetscut threw out the poem he was carrying. "Right you are, Baron. We'll go together. Safety in numbers, what? Listen to these directions. Discover then a streamwell's ford, tug thrice upon the royal cord. Then my honour guard will bring loyal subjects to their king." Does that make any sense to you, old chap? "Pay no heed to that nincompoke," said Myrtlewort. "I think I might know where it is. Round here they calls all the pikefishers stream wolf. Two of our scouts found the place a couple of days back. A shallow crossing just before the stream breaks into the river. That's a ford, ain't it?" Jacques picked up a short spear. "Canst take us there, hogwife?" Makelwort bawled at her rabble hogs. "Belay! Break camp, hogs! Barley Bear, Shunko, take us to that place you scouted out. Stay here, Spikes, or we'll leave you behind, Drucho." Meanwhile, the party led by Lord Brocktree made good speed down the river, Dotty and Gert digging their paddles deep and calling out the pace in true Gaussian fashion. Towards evening they met up with Jacques, and that night after supper round the stone oven campfire, Lord Brocktree and the tribe leaders, Jacques the Sling, Baron Drucho, Loggerlog Gren, Gert son of Longladle, and Roughgar Brookback the Otter, made a pact. Between them they would gather a great army and take Salamandaston, free it from the claws of Ungat Trun. Lord Brocktree's stern voice caused neck hairs to bristle. "The lands our creatures live on must not be tainted by vermin hordes. But this will not be accomplished by one tribe alone. I need you all. Any beast that loves freedom. Hedgehogs, shrews, squirrels, moles, and especially hares. We will go with you to the realm of this self-proclaimed Hare King. He must be challenged and defeated. Then he and his followers must be persuaded to join us." Lord Stonepaw had been watching the passage outside the cavern for sight or sound of foe beasts. Both he and Stiffener were taking turns on sentry, but there had been little to report in the last several hours. The Badger Lord arrived back in the cavern to find his hares grouped round old Bramwell, urging him to recall something, but Bramwell was very old and confused. He looked pleadingly at the faces around him. "Hey, what? Surely you can recall it yourselves?" This announcement was followed by snorts of impatience. "'Twas before our time. Nurse Willoway was long gone then." Stonepaw joined them. Placing a paw round Bramwell's skinny old shoulders, he silenced the rest. "Calm down now, friends. What's going on here?" "Bramwell thinks he knows a way out, sir. But the old buffer's gone and forgotten the bally thing." Stonepaw raised his eyebrows severely at the speaker. "A hare can forget lots of things when he reaches the winter seasons. You should know that." Bramwell pounded a feeble paw against his grey head. "'Tis in there, sire, the old skip-rope rhyme that Nurse Willoway used to teach young leverettes. But alas, it was so long ago, I can't remember it." Stonepaw scratched his stripes pensively. "I was here in Nurse Willoway's time. I'll tell you what, old friend. You and I will sit down someplace quiet with a bite of cheese and some ale. We'll work it out together. and Blench can write it down as we remember it. 70 hares had been taken captive by Unger Trun's horde beasts. Torleap put his ear to the barred oak door of the cell into which they'd all been locked. He listened carefully, trying to distinguish the voices he could hear coming from somewhere beyond. But he was distracted by a fat, hungry old hare called Woby, bewailing the fact that she was short of food. "My word, Celia's old girl, I can't ever recall starving like this. I'd normally be sitting down to me post-luncheon snack now. Rose petal and maple wafers, scones with strawberry preserve and meadow cream, with a nice pot of mint and comfrey tea. How long will we have to put up with this state of affairs? Starving's no fun." Normally polite, Torleap rounded on her. "I say, ma'am, do you mind giving the old jaws a blinking rest? What? Confound it all, we could be a lot worse off." "Indeed, sir," said Woby. "Pray, how?" "Well, for a start, we could have been locked up in the cellars in the flipping dark. Granted, we've got no food, but at least we can see daylight." He gestured to the round hole which formed a window. Sailors nodded her agreement. "Lovely view of the sea from up here, what? Suppose Trun thought that if they'd locked us up in the cellars, Lord Stonepaw and the others may have broken us out." Old Bramwell was blinking drowsily by the time they had pieced together the skipping rhyme. Stonepaw was tired too. He stifled a yawn. "Well, I hope we haven't forgotten anything. Read it out, Blench." The cook read aloud from her neat lines of script. "Down in the cellars where no beast goes, little Bob Hare went running. He ran and followed his nose where the rocks never let the sun in. Oh, woe is me, cried little Bob, 'tis dark and so unsightly. I must find some way out of here, to where the sun shines brightly. So he climbed up to the coiling snake, all damp and slippy feeling, and found beyond the big plum cake a hole right through the ceiling." Troby scratched between his ears. "Beg pardon, sir, but where in the name of salad do we find a climbing snake, what?" A hare called Willip corrected him. "Not a climbing snake, 'twas a coiling snake. It says little Bob climbed up to it, up there." She pointed up at the cave ceiling. Like stargazers, the badger and his hares wandered about the cavern, heads thrown back, staring at the stalactite formations. "Aha! There it is, I see it!" Splash! The badger lord's huge paws scooped a dripping Troby up from the pool. "Where? Point it out, quickly!" Dancing to and fro, shaking freezing water from his fur, Troby tried to recite the coiling snake. "There!" Above the rock ledges, in the cavern's dark shadowed corner, the stalactite hung. At some point the water had taken a different course, threading its way around the main column and forming a spiral winding about the stalactite, an unmistakable representation of a coiling snake. Stiffener, being the most agile, was brought in from sentry duty and replaced by Perlo. Cord girdles, woven belts, and tough bowstrings were soon lashed together into an awkward but serviceable rope. Stiffener coiled it about his shoulders, then up he went, clinging like a fly to the slippery rock ledges. Bit by painstaking bit, the boxing hare made his way upward until he reached the stalactite they were certain was the coiling snake. Leaning out from the ledge, he took hold of it, inspecting the dark ceiling above. Bramwell called up to him. "Do you see the big plum cake? That's what the rhyme says you want to look for. Any sign?" Stiffener arched his neck back, searching. "Sire, can you move one of those big lanterns this way?" Stonepaw shifted a lantern directly beneath the hare. "I found it, mates. Back down in a tick. Stand clear now." The makeshift rope unravelled, its end hitting the floor. Stiffener came down it paw over paw and landed lightly. "Up there, just right at that coiling snake thing. There's the fat wide end of a stalactite which must have snapped off. Looks just like a big old plum cake. T'other side of it is a hole. Goes straight through the ceiling, sir. Anyhow, I swung across there and tied the rope round a little nub of rock inside the hole, so we can all climb up there." Lord Stonepaw hugged Stiffener fondly. "Splendid work, Stiffener. You're a real corker." Cubber, a big shrew, saluted Log-a-Log Gren with a flourish of his rapier. "Got up an hour afore dawn, ma'am.
Scoured the bank by the ford and found what you're looking for." "You mean you found the royal, whatchamacallit?" called Fleetscut from his place on the breakfast line. "Where was it?" "'Tain't much, mate. Just a big thick red cord hanging from a whopping great hornbeam. I'll take you there, after breakfast. Float me log, I'm starving." Brocktree stepped out and shook Cubber's paw. "Take my place at the front of the line. Well done, sir." An hour later, their hunger sated by cheese and oatmeal cakes, the remaining cranberry tarts, and some good Gausim cider, every beast adjourned to the ford bank. Cubber pointed out the hornbeam tree, around the lee side of which hung a red tasselled rope, its length going off up amid the foliage. "That's the one, though I ain't tugged on the rope yet." Brocktree performed an exaggerated bow to Dotty. "Would ye pray do the honours, milady?" The hairmaid curtsied prettily, took firm hold of the cord, and gave it 3 hefty tugs. The thin boughs and the hornbeam crown shook, dislodging a colony of jackdaws. Flapping angrily into the air, they set a din of harsh cries ringing into the quiet woodlands. Baron Drucko watched the birds settle back onto the tree. "Ha ha! You'd think you could afford proper bells if this bucko's a king like he says he is. What do we do now? Shall I give the rope a few more tugs?" Once again, he wasn't fast enough to escape Merkelwort's hatchet. She clipped one of his head spikes and pushed him down on his bottom. "You leave that rope alone, nincomscoop. We sit and wait. Ain't that right, you badgership?" Brocktree unwound Skittles from his sword hilt and sat down alongside Drucko. "Right, ma'am, we wait." Jucker and Gren deployed both their tribes to the shrubbery, where they concealed themselves. The rest sat and waited. Morning was well on, when Gert leaned close to Brocktree. "Oh, you're some beast a coomin' this way, sir." The Badger Lord sat casually, eyes half closed. "Me too, friend. Every beast sits still now. Stay calm." 2 rough-looking mountain hares marched up armed to the teeth. "A wheel now, laddies," said their leader. "What have we here?" "No good asking them. Why don't you ask me that?" replied Brocktree. "Hearken to me, Striped Dog. You're in no position to be saucy with me. My hair's upright and armed already. Ye and these beauties of yourn are setting down unprepared. Do you ken?" The Badger Lord uttered a short bark. Gausim and Squiddles emerged from hiding, rapiers and slings in evidence. The mountain hare saw his troop was surrounded. Brocktree rose to his full height, sword in paw. "Oh, I ken all right, hare. I ken if you give impudence to Lord Brocktree of Brockhall, you'll find your ears dangling from yonder alarm rope, so keep a civil tongue in your head." The hare was visibly cowed. "My apologies, Lord. Sept have to be careful of strangers about these parts. What was it you were wanting?" Jucker the Sling dropped from a hornbeam bough. "Thou wilt take us to the one who calleth himself king. Move!" "Look fit enough, don't they, what?" remarks Fleetscut to Ruff, as they followed the hares on a tortuous path through the woodland. "Touch of training and discipline should bring those laddies up to the mark, what?" A profusion of noises from afar could be heard on the still woodland air. Loud cheering, drumbeats, singing, shouting. The hare leader, taking care to keep clear of Brocktree, remarked, "Och, brace yourselves, my babes. You're about to enter the court of King Bucko Big Bones, the roaring beast hisself." Troby had already climbed the rope of belts and bowstrings, and was sitting in the entrance of the ceiling hole, when Lord Stonepaw called, "Perlo, you're next." A worried frown flashed across the Badger's face, and he hurried to the concealed entrance. There was no sign of Perlo standing sentry in the narrow rift. Stonepaw heard yelling and clattering from outside. Forcing his great bulk through the crack, the Badger Lord pushed out into the passage. Around the first bend, Perlo was being set upon by 6 or more vermin. He fell with 2 on top of him, the rest scrabbling to get at him. Stonepaw came hurtling into the fray. "You lay!" Ripping the 2 horde beasts off Perlo, the Badger Lord smashed them head-on against the rock walls. The others fled, running wildly for their lives. Stonepaw pulled Perlo upright. "Are you badly hurt, my friend?" Perlo shook his head. "I'll be all right, sir. But they found our cave. 'Twas my mistake to step out into the passage holding a torch. The badger threw a paw about Perlo to steady him. Come on, we'll soon have you up through the hole and out. But even as he found the cavern entrance, Stonepaw could hear the din of many vermin charging along the underground tunnels toward the secret cave that was no longer a secret. As they entered the cavern, Stiff and a medic ran to help them. Come on, Perlo, let's get you up the rope. Stonepaw lifted the wounded hare onto the rope, then turned to the others waiting their turn to climb. I want you all up and through that hole, as quick and safe as possible. Stiffer, you'll be the last hare up. Stay here until the last one's gone. Understood? The boxing hare threw a stiff salute. Sir, but what about you, sir? Never mind about me. I've given you an order, and I expect it to be obeyed. Blench, you go next. Help Troby and Perlo to haul the others up into the hole. Go! The din outside was very close now. Stonepaw grabbed a javelin and a chunk of rock and lumbered towards the entrance. Stiffener was at his side, paws clenched. I'm coming with you, sir. The Badger Lord pushed him in the chest, knocking him back a pace. I gave you an order, Stiffener, medic. Are you disobeying me? Tears sprang to the boxing hare's eyes. You know I've never disobeyed your orders, sir, but there'll be too many vermin for you out there. You need help, sir. Stonepaw ruffled Stiffener's ears fondly. Not this time, old friend. You must get away to lead our warriors. I must hold the entrance to buy you the time to get them out. It is my duty as their lord. Promise me one thing, though. You will try to free Sailors and the others if they are still alive. Promise? Stiffener wiped a paw across his eyes and saluted Lord Stonepaw one last time. Promise? I swear it on me life, sir. The first blue rat's head poked around the rift which formed the cavern entrance. Stonepaw turned his back on Stiffener and charged, bellowing the war cry of Salamandastron. Eulalia! It was as if the long seasons had fallen away from the old badger. Strength coursed through his veins like wildfire. Vermin hurtled about him like dandelion clocks in the wind. Wedging himself in the rift, Stonepaw went at them as they crashed on him in waves. But bit by bit, force of numbers drove Stonepaw back into the cavern, and now they were coming at him from all sides. A quick glance told him that his hares had escaped safely. He battled on doggedly, but there was no end to the vermin. Back he went. Then Stonepaw began to laugh aloud. He threw himself onto the closest group of vermin, wrapping his fearsome paws about as many as he could grab. With one last war cry, Lord Stonepaw of Salamandastron summoned up his final strength and jumped out into the great pool. Eulalia! Groddle and the blue horde beast packed around the pool rim. Pale green luminescence deep down in the icy water shrouded itself around the dark wriggling mass, which sank down, 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 until it was lost to sight. Wordlessly they stared at the waters, the silence broken only by water dripping, flames crackling, and the agonized moans of their wounded. Thus died Lord Stonepaw, he who had ruled the mountain longer than any other badger lord. Ungatron was furious, though he didn't let it show. Groddle, Thrall, and Mireflech lay flat on their faces in front of the wildcat, each waiting to be interrogated by him. Trun smiled as if humouring Groddle. My faithful fox magician, I wanted the striped dog alive, yet I've been told that many who were down there heard you shouting for him to be slain. I know you three are telling the truth about the striped dog's death. There were too many witnesses for it to have been a lie, but think, Groddle, there's something you forgot. Can you recall what it is, my friend? Groddle was far too petrified to answer, though he knew his master was about to tell him. Still smiling, Trun spoke. What became of nearly a score of hares? Did you magic them away? Perhaps they vanished into thin air, or faded into the rocks down there. Tell me. Groddle had no choice but to reply. Mightiness, we could find no trace of them, though we searched hard and long. Ungatron disregarded the fox. He was staring at two rats who were providing the prisoner's escort for Groddle, Thrall, and Mireflech. Aren't you two the new recruits to my blue hordes? Refresh my memory. What are your names? The rat with a disfigured tooth curving onto his chin replied for them both. Your Highness, we're both sea rats. I'm Rip Fang, and this is Dumai, my kin rat. Sun nodded as he assessed the pair. Former pirates, eh? I like that. Well, this is a lucky day for you. I'm promoting you both to the rank of captain. Exchange uniforms at Maya Fleck and Frawl. From now on, they are to be the lowest of horde beasts. They will be your servants. He turned to the former captain. But first, Frawl, you'll return to the cave where the striped dog perished. Take our friend Groddle with you. The three of you will stay down there until you capture the hares or find out how they escaped. Each day that you're not successful in your task, you'll be flogged and given no food. Oh, cheer up. There's water aplenty down there, a great pool of it. You won't get thirsty. Ripfang, Dumai, get these idiots out of my sight. The hares sat down to rest a moment in the long down-sloping tunnel. Bramwell rubbed the back of his neck and complained. Oh, 'tain't much fun marching with the old neck bent all day. Ceiling should be a bit higher, what? Perlo started up, batting at his scut. Youch! Confound it! Some beast just bit me. Stiffener swung the torch in his direction. Where? Right on the end of my bobtail, old lad. Where'd you think? Stiffener shoved him roughly aside. I never asked where you were bit. I meant, where was the beast that bit you? Troby grabbed the torch from Stiffener and stared wide-eyed. Scuttling sideways, teeming masses of crabs were advancing, claws held high and snapping open and shut, blowing froth and bubbles from their gaping mouths. The noise of them could be heard over the advancing tide outside. It sounded like a shower of hailstones as their hard-shelled legs rattled against the rocks. The hares looked to Stiffener. What do you think we should do? The boxing hare decided instantly. We've got to run for it. Straight through the middle of those blighters and not stop for anything. They're trying to get away from the sea. We're trying to get to it. Might be a bit of an help. Troby, me and you will take the lead and see if we can batter through. The rest of you stay close together. Willip, Blench, stick in the middle. Keep tight hold of Bramble. Well, there goes, mates. Eulalia! The charge carried them helter-skelter down the tunnel, straight into the crabs. Troby and Stiffener bowled aside as many as they could, striking about with a couple of javelins. It was an almost impossible task. The tunnel was far too narrow, and soon became completely jammed with a jumbled melee of hares and crabs. Then the wave came. Peak of high tide sent a monstrous roller crashing up the tunnel entrance with all the awesome power of the stormy sea. Boiling white, blue and green, it shot up the board of the rocky passage and hit the mass of hares and crabs like a mighty sledgehammer, shooting them hard uphill. Then it sucked them back in a whirling vacuum of seawater. Stiffener spun like a top, jolting against rocks and crab shells, his nose, mouth, eyes and ears choked by the salt water. Stomach down, he was hurled flat, his mouth gaping wide as he skidded along until it was full of sand. A moment later, he was upright in the night air, waist deep with waves bashing him. Coughing up grit and brine, he wiped the stinging seawater from his eyes. A familiar figure waded towards him. Blench! He staggered up and joined paws with her. Keep tight, old man. Let's find the others. Where's old Bramwell got to? Hi there, young fella. Over here, what? Only then did Stiffener realise that it was raining hard. Bramwell was sitting on the shore in the downpour, waving a piece of driftwood. Several others were with him. Troby came swimming along, his head popping up alongside Stiffener, spitting a jet of seawater into the air. All present and correct, I think. Keep your voices down, mates, called Stiffener in the loudest whisper he could muster. There might be vermin patrols around. Bramwell, we'll meet you in the lee of those rocks. It was a cold, windy, wet and moonless night as they huddled together on the north side of a ragged rock spur. Bramwell could just make out the shape of Salamandaston's dark bulk to the south of where they sat. This chunk of rock's part of our mountain, a great spur buried beneath the sand and sticking up again here by the sea. Willip crouched down and scuttled towards the end of the rock protruding into the sea. Bramwell's right, she reported when she came back. I saw the mouth of the tunnel we came out of. Though 'tis so thickly overgrown with seaweed, a body would never know 'twas there, what? Bramble shivered, shaking his saturated fare. Well, we made it, chaps. We're alive and free, but with no weapons or food. What's next, young Stiff, eh?
Stiffener blinked rain from his eyes.
Can't stay here, that's for sure, mates. We'd best move while the going's good. There's some rock ledges and dunes east of here. I picked blackberries there last autumn. Let's take a look over that way, what?
In the hour before dawn, they topped a rise in the sandhills. Some white limestone cliff ridges loomed up on their left. The rain was becoming heavier, whipped sideways by the wind. With both ears plastered flat to his head, and his fare thoroughly sand-gritted and wet, Stiffener looked back in the direction of Salamandastron.
See, Lord, I kept me vow so far, and don't you fret now. I'll be going back to our mountain, and if there be a single hair alive there, I'll rescue him. I promise.
Dotty had never in her life seen anything like the court of King Bucko, nor had any of her travelling companions. It was situated in a broad, beautiful woodland glade, backed by a steep rocky hill with a stream bordering one side, and it was packed with teeming life. There were moles, otters, voles, hedgehogs, mice, squirrels and shrews everywhere. But hares formed the main presence. Hares, big, strong, young and bold. Fleetscut nodded at them. He had to raise his voice so that Dotty could hear him above the din as they pushed and jostled their way through.
Well, stop me ears. A chap can recognise the offspring of Salamandastron hares, you know. Look just like the mothers and fathers they do. Some of those great lumps of fur and bone. I bounced them on my knee when they were tiny leverets.
A carnival atmosphere reigned over the course. Groups of hedgehogs competed with oak clubs on hollow logs. Squirrels were performing acrobatic feats, flying over the heads of the crowd. Shrews and voles wrestled in packs, one team against another. Lord Brocktree was the only badger present at the massive gathering, standing out head and shoulders above other beasts. His back-slung battle sword received many admiring glances, and not a creature tried to bump or jostle him. The badger lord winced. By my stripes, how any creature could put up with this infernal din is beyond me. Let's find somewhere less noisy. They took refuge on the stream bank, beneath a couple of crack willows which afforded generous shade. Jacques sprang moodily to a low willow branch. I like it not, this place of loud fools. 'Tis an affront to the ears and eyes, a gathering of mad beasts. A hare, with 6 others attending him, marched up to Brocktree.
You'll be the badger lord who's come a-visiting, what? His Majesty King Bucko wants a word with you.
Steps made from logs led up to the fork of an old cherry laurel, padded and draped with hanging velvet to form the royal throne. King Bucko Big Bones was bigger than most hares. He lounged casually in the tree fork, one footpaw dangling. A broad belt girded his ample waist, decorated with coloured stones. Around his head, though cocked jauntily over one eye, he wore a gold circlet interwoven with laurel leaves. He cast an eye over his visitors, as if they were of no great interest. "Do you know about your heeds or bend a knee to your king?" Brocktree's answer was equally dismissive. "We bow to no creatures, even self-appointed kings. Do you not find it common courtesy to rise in the presence of a badger lord, instead of sitting draped up there like a drunken beast?" King Bucko laughed and bounded down the steps, paw outstretched. He gripped the badger's paw and applied pressure. "Orca like you well, my friend. Do you mean to challenge me?" Brocktree stood smiling easily, allowing Bucko to squeeze his paw to the maximum. Then the badger lord squeezed back. White-faced and trembling, the hare was forced to his knees. He managed a pained smile. "Jings, I hope you don't challenge me. Would you no let my paw free afore you flatten it completely?" The badger released his paw. Bucko stood up, massaging it and smiling ruefully. "Don't worry," said Brocktree. "I won't be challenging you, but one of my party will." King Bucko leapt over the logs, right where Dotty was standing, and winked roguishly at the hare maid. "Hey, you're a pretty wee thing, ain't you?" Dotty looked distant. "Actually, pretty's the wrong word, sir. I'm a fatal beauty, really. Runs in the family, you know." "Oh, go away with you, missy. I've seen fatal beauties, and you're no one of them. Still, you're a pretty wee thing." Dotty leaned across to Ruff. I don't like that cad Bucko King, or whatever he calls himself. I'd like to take the blighter down a peg or three, what?
Ruff stared at her in surprise. An air maiden like you, Dotty. Do you think you could beat him?
I don't think. I know I can beat the blustering bounder. Campfires burned all over the glade area as night fell warm and soft. The noise and merriment continued unabated. Dotty sat with Fleetscut beneath the willow. The rest of their party had gone off to join in the fun and games. The old hare had a worried look.
I say, dash it all, Miss Dotty, I was the one who should have challenged Bucko Big Bones, not you, a young hare-maid, what?
Dotty poured cider for Fleetscut. Sorry, old chum, you're far too old. He'd eat you. The dark bulk of Lord Brocktree loomed up out of the night. He shook his head at Dotty. I delivered his challenge to Bucko Big Bones. Sorry, miss. He wouldn't accept it. He said you should be at home helping your mamma to do the washing. Then he laughed with his cronies for a while and told me to tell you there was no way he was going to fight a hare maiden. Dotty grabbed Fleetscut roughly and hauled him upright. Give me that bark scroll you were telling me about, the one found by that rabble hog. Give it to me this bloomin' instant. The old hare rummaged in his tunic and produced the battered and stained scroll. Dotty snatched it from him. Listen to this, sir. The blighter's own challenge. Come mother, father, daughter, son, I'll take on all or just the one. Aye, try to beat me and defeat me, set 'em up, I'll knock 'em down. King Bucko Big Bones wears the crown. She waved the tattered bark scroll in Brocktree's face. Now, sir, you've heard it. Is that a challenge or not? What? The Badger Lord nodded gravely. Couldn't be any clearer. 'Tis a challenge, right enough. Dotty quickly rolled the scroll and jammed it in her belt. Huh! That's flipping well good enough for me. Come on. She stormed off, her footpaws almost punching holes in the ground. King Bucko was in high good humour. He sat on his tree-fork throne, swilling dandelion beer and laughing uproariously with his comrades. Dotty bounded up the steps and shook out the bark scroll. She thrust it under the king's nose. It says here that you'll fight mother, father, daughter or son, right? The big mountain hare flicked the scroll from her paws with his sceptre and tossed it over his shoulders. Maybe it does, maybe it don't. Which are you getting so stirred up about, my pretty one? Dotty's paw prodded him hard in the chest. Don't you ever call me your pretty one, you great blowbag. I'm here to take up your challenge. One of the guards tried to lay paws on Dotty for prodding his king. He froze as a sword point from below tickled his tail. Lord Brocktree was staring up at him. Dotty prodded Bucko again, harder this time. Well? The king's former good humour was fast deserting him. Och, I'm nae going to fight with nae wee hare-maid. Which d'ye think I am, a bully? Dotty marched off down the steps, her nose in the air. Since you ask, sir, I'll tell you what I think you are, a liar and a coward. In the horrified silence that followed, King Bucko came bounding down the steps after her, paws clenched tight. Yara, ya whey-faced whelp, we'll sell this right here and new. I'll no have a lassie cheeking me. Lord Brocktree stepped in, pointing his sword at Bucko. Let's do it properly at the designated time. Now, do you accept this hare's challenge? Answer yes or no. The mountain hare's expression was murderous. Aye, striped dog. I accept the challenge. You'll be hearing from me seconds afore midnight. Wet and weary, Stiffen the medic was leading his friends over the dunes toward the cliffs, when an otter popped up right in front of him. Aye, aye. What's this, then? The old hare's outin'. Ain't picked very good weather for it, mate, have you? Stiffen blew a dewdrop of rain from his nose and grinned. No, we ain't. The otter threw a paw round the boxing hare's shoulders. Not to worry, me old lad. We'll find you a dry berth and a mouthful round the fire. My name's Broggerlaw, skipper of sea otters. But let's get you and your fogies in out the rain, then we'll natter. Broggerlaw led them to the cliffs. He clapped paws to his mouth and shouted at the blank stone face. Ahoy, to halt! 'Tis only Brog with some old hares. A sea buckthorn bush growing against the cliff's face was pushed aside at one corner. The homely face of an otterwife appeared. Land's sakes, Brog, get those poor beasts in out the weather. They filed in, staring about. It was a big, rough and ready cave. full of otters, and a fully grown grey heron, which stood immobile on one leg, watching as Brog grouped them about the fire. Bread was brought to them, with cheese baked on top of it. From a cauldron by the fire, the hares were served with steaming bowls of stew. Brogalore's mother, Frutch, watched appreciatively as they ate hungrily. "Good, ain't it? That's my special tater and welcome leek chowder. That'll put the life back in you." Stiffener could hear the rain outside battering the cliff face as he sat on the warm sand round the fire with his friends, listening to Brogalore's story. "'Tis like this, messmates. We're sea otters, see? Quite happy till old Lungat arrived with his blue vermin. I tell you, we just about got away with our lives that day. They stole our best 2 ships, so here we be, sitting in this cave waiting our chances." Old Bramwell told the hare's tale of woe to the sea otters. Goodwife Frutch wept as she listened, dabbing her apron to the tears. "Oh, you poor beasts! Can't we help 'em, Brog?" The sturdy sea otter skipper raised sand with his rudder. "Course we'll help." Stiffener thanked him on behalf of all the hares. Bramwell moved nervously away from the great heron. Don't mind me asking, Brog, but what's that big bird doing living with you, what?" Brogalore stroked the heron's snake-like neck fondly. "This fella, name's Rulango. Been with us since he was a chick, never speaks, fends and feeds for hisself. Rulango, me old fish grubber, would you take a flight round the mountain and see what you can see?" Rip Fang and Dumai, like most sea rats, were hard and cruel, and they were enjoying their new positions as horde captains. They sat by a small fire they had made in the cavern, calling out to the captives at frequent intervals. "Hey there, Frol," said Rip Fang. "Stay where I can see you. Don't go hiding in dark corners where you can catch a quick nap. You, Groddle, you go and get some rope, lots of it. We need to tie yous 2 up tight tonight. You'll be staying down here. Us captains got to get some decent rest and hot victuals. Well, don't stand there looking gormless. Move yourself." Groddle did get lots of rope, a great coil of line from one of the ships. That night, he and Frol were bound together from tails to necks. When the 2 captains had gone, Frol growled. "Why did you bring so much rope I can hardly move a whisker?" "Shut your useless mouth," said Groddle. "Those 2 mudbrains don't know it, but I've found where the long-ears made their escape from. There's a way out of here, and I'll tell you where when you've chewed through this rope. Now get your teeth working, Stoat. We need this rope to reach the place. That's why I brought so much." That night, though both of them made their way to the tunnel, only Groddle escaped, leaving Frol behind to the tender mercies of the spider crabs. Groddle, battered, bleeding, and totally exhausted, was swept out into the sea, clinging to a piece of driftwood. The evening of that same day saw Stiffener and the hares awake, eagerly awaiting Rulango's return. When he stalked into the cave, Brogalore stroked the great heron's neck. "Well now, about time you showed up, mate. So what have you got to say for yourself?" Rulango tapped the sandy floor with his widespread talons. The sea otter smoothed out an expanse of the sand, and the heron began drawing with his beak. Stiffener moved close, interpreting what he saw. "There's the coastline and the sea. Now he's sketching out our mountain. Look at this, Bramwell." The ancient hare joined Stiffener and watched admiringly. "That's Salamandastron, sure enough, viewed from the sea. What's that? Oh, I see. He's drawing a circle in the mountain. Wait, 'tis a window hole near the top level." "Good bird," said Brogalore. "You've found where Trun's keeping the hares locked up. Is that right?" The heron nodded his head emphatically, then retired to a corner where he perched on one leg. Blench viewed the sketch with dismay. "Oh, lorks, we've no chance of climbing up that high. What's to be done?" Brogalore nodded to himself a few times, as if confirming his thoughts. "'Tis too high for us to climb up to them, but they could climb down with the right help. We needs ropes, good long uns. Once we've got 'em, Rulango can fly the ropes up to your mates, and they can lower themselves down." It was a splendid idea, but Willip found an obstacle. "I don't see any great long ropes hereabouts." "Ahoy," said Brogalore. "Rulango's drawing again." The skipper of Sea Otters took one look at the sketch. "You're a crafty old wing flapper, mate. Dervy, Colum, Spraydog, come with me and Rulango. There's work to be done. Cloaked in lengths of old sailcloth, 2 blue hoard rats stood deck watch on the bows of one of Ungatrun's vast flotilla of vessels, which were anchored in the bay facing Salamandastron. Both rats blinked rain from their eyes as they staggered down the slippy deck, clinging to the rails. "Well, where is this big bird of yours?"
It must have flew off, but I saw it.
"Ah, you're talking through your tail, mate. There wasn't no big bird here."
Then tell me, where's that heaving line that was coiled up right where you're standing?"
"I don't know, clever snout. You tell me."
The big bird took it."
"Why, 'cause it thought it was a giant worm?" "Don't talk rubbish, mate. The hunger's gone to your head. That fox Groddle must have took it. He was here today looking for ropes." Roulango dropped the last rope to Brog and his otters, who were waiting in the sea. Silently, they coiled 9 strong, thin, heaving lines about them and swam off shorewards, swift and sleek. Brog knotted the heaving lines into one massively long rope. Perlo watched the long coils building up into a great thick cylinder.
"Great seasons, no beast to be able to lift that whacking huge thing. How do we move it to the mountain?"
Broggalore had thought it all out carefully. 9 of us forms a line, each one carrying only a single rope's length. When we reaches your mountain, Roulango takes the end and flies up to the window and passes it to him. They halted not far from Salamandastron's base, and Skipper began looping the rope end round a heron's long bony leg. "We'll stay down here and pay the line out, mate. You fly up there and give 'em your end. They'll know what to do." Stiffener glanced up at the sky.
"Too late, Brog. 'Twill be done in an hour or so. My friends wouldn't stand a chance in broad daylight out on the mountain face. Let Roulango take the line up. When they make it secure, I'll shin up there. Tell 'em what's going on, and stop with 'em. You and the bird go back and hide out with your otters for the day. All of you come back here at nightfall, and we'll do it then. 'Tis the only safe way."
Ungatrun was questioning his captain-in-chief, Carangoul. "What are they saying aboard my ships? Is it mutiny?" "Mightness, not yet. I whip him. Work him hard, but no food. They talk, whisper, steal. Need food to live." With all the sinewy litheness of a great cat, the conqueror bounded from his throne and swept out the room. "Follow me. I think I have the answer."
Sail Ears pulled Stiffener out of a shaft of evening light. "Hide yourself, some beast's coming."
Stiffener stowed himself behind some of the older ones in a corner. He heard the key grate in the lock. Torleap joined Sail Ears, and they stood together in front of the others as the doors swung open and Ungatrun and the hard-faced Carangoul walked in. Torleap took a pace forward.
"I demand food for these hares. We've had nothing but one pail of water since we were locked in here."
The guard captain struck him down with the spear butt. "Silence, Long Ears. Lower orders do not speak in the presence of mighty Ungatrun." Ungatrun nodded toward the hares and smiled, raising his eyes at Carangoul. "Yes?" The fox Carangoul nodded, satisfied. "Yes, mightiness." They swept out, the door slammed shut and the key turned. Torleap sat up, rubbing at his swollen face. "What do you suppose that was all about?" Stiffener helped Torleap up onto his footpaws. "I've got a pretty good idea what they were sizing us up for, but we won't be hanging around to find out the truth of it." Unstowing the rope from where he'd hidden it, the old boxing hare began giving orders. "It'll be dark soon, and Brog will be waiting down below with his otters. Sail Ears, is there any way we can jam that lock so they can't come barging in here?"
"Give me a tick and I'll think of something."
"Right you are, ma'am. I'll make the line fast and watch at the window for Brog and the crew. Torleap, if you're feeling better, line them up in order to go. Oldest and shakiest first, fittest last." Sail Ears had a brainwave about the lock.
"Any beast got a bit of fluffy cloth about them?" "Here," said Wobie. "Take the corner of my shawl."
Using a pin, Sail Ears poked the knitted shawl end into the keyhole until the lock was packed tight with fluffy shawl.
"There now. Try turning the blinking key in that lot."
A pale sliver of silver crescent moon was visible in the deep dark blue sky, when suddenly the great heron Roulango filled the window space. Stiffener breathed a sigh of relief.
"Good to see you, mate.
Is Brog and the crew down there?" One emphatic nod and the heron flew off. Things went smoothly for the next hour or so. Stiffener had got all the oldest ones down and half of the fitter ones, when Tall-Leap held up a paw of warning. "Hist! It's those two beasts, Rip Thing and his confounded brother. They're at the blinking door." Rip Fang's voice could be heard clearly from beyond the door. "Oh, very good, Doom-Eye. What a clever brother I got, eh? Steals the key off the guard captain, and now he can't even open the flaming door with it. Come here, let me try." There followed a deal of poking and scratching. Stiffener signalled the next candidate for the line. "Come on, mate, move. We can't afford to hang about any more." Bang! Thud! "Ahoy in there. Get this rubbish out the lock hole, or it'll be the worse for yous when we open this door." Stiffener watched another hair disappear over the sill into the night, clinging tight to the rope. "Now look at what you done, idiot. You've gone and broke the key off in the lock, you senseless rat."
"Never mind, Rip, we can batter the door down, eh?"
There were only 3 hairs left in the cell now. Stiffener guided the next one onto the rope. An argument between the 2 sea rats was in full flow. Stiffener winked at Tall-Leap.
"We did it, mate. Come on, out you go."
The boxing hare watched the taut rope anxiously, waiting for Tall-Leap to get far enough down it to let him take his leave of the hated prison cell. In the passage outside, the altercation between the 2 sea rats continued.
"Ow, ow! You bit me tail, savage! Well,
"You shouldn't have called me a slime-brain toad."
Stiffener vaulted onto the sill, took a firm grip of the taut line, and began his descent with the quarrel still going on. Willing paws guided Stiffener to the ground. Then Brogalaw was hugging him fiercely. "Good to see your old face again, mate." The boxing hare looked about at his friends. "Thanks for your help, Brog. I kept my promise to Lord Stonepaw.
There ain't a hair left on Salamandastron."
Brog and his crew arrived back at the cave in broad daylight. Stiffener and the hares had only just got there ahead. Greetings and introductions were still being made as Brog entered the cave. He joined Stiffener and put a paw to his brow in mock despair. "Season's a salt sea, Stiff, mate. Couldn't you have left that old Wobie creature behind? We got 3 of them blubbing now." Brogalaw's mother Frutch and Blench the cook were being helped by Wobie to stir the chowder pot. All 3 were sobbing and sniffing gratefully for the hare's deliverance. Later that night, the fires burned low. Nearly 80 hares had been found places to sleep, and Blench was helping Frutch and Wobie to bake bread for breakfast. Stiffener and Brogalaw sat together making plans. "One thing's clear, Stiff," said the sea otter. "The blue bottoms are low on victuals. Feeding an army that size takes some doing, mate. Trun will have to send foraging parties into the land hereabouts. Do you catch my drift?" Stiffener smiled grimly. A good scheme was forming. "I'll post Rolango to keep a lookout from the air. Whenever he sees a foraging party set out, he'll report which direction they're a-going." Stiffener warmed to the idea eagerly.
"Our crews can harass them, steal the supplies, hit them when they're least expecting it."
Brog chuckled. Stiffener, Medic, and Skipper Brogalaw clasped paws. "We'll teach 'em the art of war, mate."
"Aye, and 'twill be the hardest lesson they've ever learned."
Dotty sat on the stream bank, breakfasting on fresh fruit salad with her friends. The hare-maid was now under instruction as a contender for King Bucko Big Bones' crown. Gren read out the rules, which had been delivered by the King's seconds. 2 days from now, the event will commence. No weapons or any arms whatsoever are allowed to be taken into the ring. All supporters and seconds must have vacated the ring by the time the crown is dropped. The moment one beast cannot rise and continue fighting, the other will be declared the winner and will be king.
"We're on the pretty one's side."
They turned to see 2 extremely fit-looking young hares lounging nearby. They were obviously twin brothers, alike as peas in a pod. Fleetscut was watching them closely as they addressed the badger.
"I'm Southpaw, and this fat ugly one's Bobweave." "Fat ugly one? Go where you bounder. Let Miss Dotty say. Come on, miss. Ain't I the best-looking one? Tell the truth now."
Fleetscut approached them, his paw extended.
"I'll tell you the truth, you young rips. Bobweave and Southpaw, eh? You're the grandsons of Stiffener Medic. I can see it in both of you. Fighting hares, born and bred, what?" "Rather. How do you do, sir? Pleased to meet you, old chap."
They exchanged greetings with all the party. Dotty took an immediate liking to the twins. Fleetscut said, "Your grandpa talked about you night and day. Said you was the finest boxers on earth." They shuffled modestly. Beg pardon, chaps," said Dotty. "But if you two are so good, then why haven't you challenged King Bucko?" "Quite simple, really, Miss Dotty. If I challenged Bucko and floored him, then I'd be King Southpaw. But I couldn't give old Bobweave orders." "True, miss. And if I challenged Bucko and won, I'd be King Bobweave. Ha! Imagine me trying to give Southpaw orders. Besides, Bucko Big Bones, he's a great big windbag, but he can be sly and dangerous as well." Jacques Sling was beginning to wave a tail impatiently. "Then canst thou tell us how the maid will defeat him?" "Well, we can't tell you exactly, ma'am, but we can help her by pointing out Bucko's weaknesses." Gert chuckled. "You'll be doing us a great favour if he can, young sirs. Tell away now, we'm all yours." Over the next 2 days, Dotty was instructed in the art of boxing by the two young hares, wrestled with Gert, and listened to the wisdom of her elders. It was all very helpful and instructive. Then it was noon of the 3rd day at the court of King Bucko Big Bones. Spectators were packed tight around the arena. Others sat on the hillside or climbed trees. However, there was no air of festive gaiety. This was serious business. The outcome would decide which hare picked up the crown. A furtive whisper rustled about Bucko and his seconds as they made their way to the ring. The mountain hare had discarded his broad belt for the event, and a paunch, which had not been visible before, was now clearly evident. Creatures commented on it in hushed tones. "Too much scoff and not enough exercise, if you ask me." "Maybe so, but old Bucko still looks dangerous enough to do the job." Bucko took the log barrier at a bound, his cloak swirling as he tossed it to his seconds. He jammed his sceptre between two of the logs, balancing the laurel-wreath gold coronet on it. Then, grim-faced, he sat down to wait. Lord Brocktree and his party led Dotty through the Isle of Creatures, which opened from the stream side. He and Ruff stepped into the arena, followed by Dotty and Girth. The hare-maid was simply clad in a short green tunic. She went over to the line scored in the earth and scraped her footpaw along it. "Come on, Bucko. Come and face me." The mountain hare swaggered slowly across and pondered his big clenched left paw. "Ye brought this on yoursel, missy. I'll be fair grieved to lay ye out flat. I've no raised my paw to a lassie before. I promise not to hit ye too hard." Dotty moved a little closer to him. "Thank you, sir, and I promise not to let you hit me at all. Now, do we stand here jaw-wagging all afternoon, or shall we get on with this? What do you say, eh?" Dotty was ready. She saw the hard, knobbly paw move in a quick arc. Falling flat, she kicked Bucko's footpaws from under him, leapt upright and fled. The crowd roared aloud at her clever move. Bucko scrambled upright and went after the hare-maid like a charging bull. Dotty skidded to a halt as he rushed by her. He turned and charged once more. Again she went down, falling flat on her back, both hind legs shooting up like pistons. Bucko's own weight and momentum carried him straight onto her. Air whooshed from his stomach as it came in contact with Dotty's footpaws, and he went ears over scut, landing hard on his back in a cloud of dust. Dotty was up and running again. Bucko arose, but not so speedily this time, one paw clutching his stomach. He did not give chase, but circled swiftly and cut off Dotty's escape as he backed her against the logs. This time it was his turn to throw himself down, his long, powerful footpaws lashing out at her. Thunk! King Bucko gasped aloud with pain. Dotty had jumped backward onto the log boundary, and the noise was audible as her opponent's footpaws hit the wood. She cleared his head at a bound and trotted to the centre of the ring. Bucko took a moment to pull a splinter from his footpaw. Then he got upright, purposefully, and limped out to meet her. They faced each other, Dotty breathing hard, but Bucko breathing harder. His eyes were red with wrath. "Stand and fight me, you wee whelp!" He lashed out with a surprisingly quick left paw. Dotty dropped into a crouch, hearing it whistle overhead. She stayed stooped, putting into practice what the twins had taught her. 1, 2, 3. Dotty whacked at the stomach protruding in front of her. Bucko's flailing right thudded against the side of her head. Stars exploded in her eyes, and the crowd noise suddenly seemed very distant. Bucko's left looped round her head and tightened on her neck. "Oh, you've got her new, Majesty!" Roaring darkness filled Dottie's brain as the breath was cut off in her throat by Bucko's grip. Dimly she could hear the Hare twins bellowing in unison. "The old bread basket, miss! Give him it in the basket!" She knew what they meant. Swinging her right furiously, she pummeled the king's stomach, and as he gasped, she slid out of his stranglehold. She found herself facing his back and shoved hard, knocking Bucko face down. He struggled up, spitting earth and wiping dust from both eyes. Lowering his head for a vicious butt, he hurtled forward. Dazed as she was, Dottie knew she had to act quickly. Holding position, the Hare-maid sucked in her stomach and arched her back. The mountain hare's bowed head struck her fractionally, jarring her hip. Clenching both paws, she brought them down in a sharp double blow on the back of Bucko's neck. Once, twice. Still bent double, Bucko carried on another 3 paces, staggering crazily. Then he crumpled and fell. A deathly hush fell upon the crowd. Lord Brocktree and Ruff supported Bucko back to the log surround. Dottie followed, limping, as she leaned heavily on Gren and Jacques. "Stand back there, every beast! Stand back, I say!" The bankful referee pushed his way through, bearing the crown and sceptre. Dottie passed them to Lord Brocktree. "Here you are, sir, crown and thingamy. Don't rightly know what I'm supposed to do with the confounded things." Bucko was taken aback. "You mean you don't want my crown and sceptre?" Dottie shook her head. "Not really. The plan wasn't for me to become queen or anything like that. No, we had a bigger idea." Brocktree patted Bucko's shoulder. "You can help us rally this crew into a great fighting force to follow us to Salamandastron and face Ungatrun." "Ungatrun, the whalecat? Hold on there, Brock. Yon's the very foe I'm bound to find and slay." Dottie gaped in surprise at the mountain hare. "You're joking, of course, sir." "Ach, 'tis nae joke, lassie. Feel my back." The Hare-maid ran her paw across the weltered ridges of flesh beneath the fur of Bucko's back. "He did this?" "Flogged me with the flat of my own sword till it brake it o'er my back and drove my hares from our hame in the North Mountains. That's the beastie they call Ungatrun for you. Aye, the whipping was carried out by a fox called Carangool on Trun's orders. And the rogue thought he'd left me for dead, you ken." Dottie felt a wave of pity sweep over her. "Would you care to take a bite of supper with us? Cheer you up, sir, what?" Bucko swiftly regained his composure and jauntiness. "Oh, I'm fair famished frae all that fighting. Lead on." Dawn's first birds were trilling to the rising sun when Dottie joined Brocktree and the company of chieftains standing on a rock protruding from the hillside. Brocktree leaned on his battle blade. Skittles perched on his footpaw, waiting patiently until every beast was standing grouped before him. Then at his nod, Bucko took the fore. "Hearken to me, my beasties. There's an old hare here who comes frae a mountain and bears a message for all warriors. Judge for yourselves, I'm nae longer your king." Bucko stood back, allowing Fleetscut to come forward. The old hare held the crown in his paw. "Mount Salamandastron is where I come from, as most of you know, and there's those here today who were born there. Now I know for certain that any hares left alive on the mountain will be slaves and prisoners of the wildcat Ungatrun and his blue hordes." He waited until the angry shouts died down. "When Bucko was king, he intended to form you into an army to hunt Trun down. Well, that still goes. Only difference is, our leader is the rightful heir of Salamandastron, Brocktree." There followed a mixture of cheering and surprised cries. Fleetscut held up the crown. "Some among you hares will remember the rhyme you learned from your elders. We follow our comrades in peace and war. The hare is a perilous beast, we know. But who commands? Who makes our law? The Badger Lords, 'twas always so. This is Lord Brocktree of Blockhall, a Badger Lord of Salamandastron by birth and by right, and this crown, won for his cause by his brave champion, Dorothea Duckfontein Dilworthy, is the symbol of his leadership." Fleet-scut past the crown to Brocktree. Every eye was upon the great badger as his powerful paws crushed the circlet into a narrow double strip. This he wound about his sword hilt with no more effort than he would have used on a green willow withe. Then the badger lord's voice boomed like thunder about the glade, setting every creature's neck hairs on end. "Friends, warriors, good beasts all, I am going to defeat the evil one Ungatrun. I am going to take back from him and his hordes the mountain that is mine. Today, now, I march for Salamandastron. Those who would follow me, call out this war cry, Eulalia!" The entire glade exploded in an ear-splitting roar. Eulalia! South of Salamandastron, in a sparsely wooded copse, a group of about 30 blue horde beasts and their stout captain Bile sat in a clearing. They'd been foraging for food. Bile was very happy with the results of the forage, but also quite hungry. So were the vermin under his command. As he strode about, a rat began undoing the drawstrings on his heavily laden haversack. Bile knew it was time to assert his authority. "Leave them apples alone or I'll have to report you." The rat pulled out an apple. "Did you hear the nice new captain mate's going to report me, he is? That's if he makes it back alive." The apple was halfway to the horde rat's mouth. When a sling stone struck his paw, he screamed and dropped the apple. "First beast to move is a dead 'un." A figure clad in a hooded brown bark cloth cloak appeared from behind a juneberry bush, its face hidden behind a woven reed mask, a long whip held in its paw. Bile gasped. "The bark crew!" Since the start of summer, the dreaded bark crew had become the terror of Ungatrun's foraging patrols. They seemed to be everywhere at once. Bile knew of horde beasts and captains who had been slain when they offered resistance to the brown-cloaked raiders. Soon lined up in threes, the foraging patrol stood facing a rift on the cliff tops in view of the sea. Taking Bile none too gently by his neck scruff, the bark crew leader made him repeat his orders. "We marches straight to the sea, sire. If we looks left or right or back, we're dead beasts. We wades into the sea up to our necks, and goes that way back to the mountain. I'm to make my report to Ungatrun that this was the work of the bark crew, and to say that he's a worthless piece of crab bait, and that he's going to starve to death with his vermin army." The whip cracked viciously over the forage patrol's heads. "Next time we see your faces, we roast you alive. Quick march! 1, 2, 1, 2. Broggalor removed the woven reed mask from his face and clasped paws with stiffener. "Another win for the bark crew, matey." A bright summer evening was drawing to its close. Ungatrun stood on the beach with his Grand Fragall and Captain Carangoul, watching as Bile and his foraging patrol stumbled through the shallows onto the sands. They presented a very odd picture. Seawater had washed the blue dye out of their fur from tail to neck. Only their faces and heads remained blue. Bile staggered up and saluted the wildcat, his body drooping with exhaustion. "Mighty one, we were ambushed." Ungat's upraised paw silenced him. "Let me guess, Captain Bile. It was the bark crew again. How many of them were there this time?" 5 score at least, mightiness." The wildcat's tail whipped from side to side angrily. "Get your patrol out of sight before others see what a pack of clowns you look." Bile saluted, then signalled his patrol to get inside the mountain. Later, Ungatrun sat closeted in his chamber with Fragall and Carangoul. "My mistake was in sending out well-behaved new captains," said Trun. "What we need is cruel, evil creatures who bend the rules to suit themselves." The wildcat stroked his whiskers reflectively. "Fragall, those sea rat brothers, tell the guards to bring them up. Fetch food from the kitchens, too." Ripfang and Doomeye were hustled into the wildcat's chamber, their sly eyes flicking from the food to their ruler. Ungatrun nodded towards the tray, which contained a flagon of damson wine and the last of Blench's fruit scones. "You must be hungry. Eat." Like a pair of ravening wolves, the two rats fell upon the food, stuffing it down and slopping wine. Ungatzrun lectured them as they crammed the victuals into their mouths. "By rights, you should be dead now, both of you. Did you think I was fooled by your lies about Grodil and Thrall? Maybe you did slay them and throw the bodies into the pool, but not because they insulted me, as you said. No, you killed them for some reason best known only to yourselves. I could have had you executed, but I chose instead to have you locked up and starved until I decided what I should do with you both." Ripfang looked up, a mess of chewed scone falling from his lips. "Thank ye, Captain. Your Mightiness." The wildcat sat back. "Excellent. Now listen to me if you want to keep eating food like that and regain your rank as captains in my hordes." Broggalor stroked the heron's neck. "Good job you found this other cave, Rulango. My old mum was beginning to kick up and create something awful about all the loot we was bringing back." The cave was up coast, slightly north of the sea otter's dwelling, a fortunate find indeed. Stifner took a torch from its wall mount to light the way out. From floor to roof, the place resembled a well-stocked larder cum armoury. Weapons and uniforms lined its walls, while at the centre there was an enormous heap of fruit, vegetables and edible roots, plunder taken from the foraging patrols by the bark crew. Brog's nose twitched at the two cauldrons, which his mum, Blench, and Wobie had perched on the fire. Skilly and Duff, me favourite." Over supper, Dervy told of his crew's exploits at sea that day. "Oh, we kept the blue-bottom fishing fleet busy, mates. We swam under the vessels and shredded the nets, stole all the shrimps, and tell Brog what you did, Colonel." "'Twas like this, see," explained the sleek otter maid with a face born to mischief. "I waited till they dropped anchors to fish. Soon as they cast their nets, I attached each boat's net to the next boat's anchor flukes. Snarled them up good and proper. You should have seen the vermin hauling away at those nets. All the vessels came bumping together." Another of Derby's crew piped up. "Aye, then they started fighting among themselves, so I slices through the anchor ropes, and off they went like big flapping birds with the wind behind them. That old fleet hit the shore so hard that they was all run aground." Sailors chuckled with delight at the sea otter's story. "Wish I could swim like you chaps, then I could jolly well go along with you." Dervy gallantly refilled her bowl from the cauldron. "You're doing just fine as the onshore bark crew, ma'am. I reckon those rascals must be really feeling the pinch now. What do you think, Stiff?" "I think you're right. They're learning a hard lesson the hard way. Even if Trun and the officers kept the best for themselves, I wager they've more or less gone through what stores were left in Blench's larders." Stifner little knew how truly he spoke. At that exact moment, Ungatzrun was prowling into Salamandastron's dining hall, followed by Fragall, carrying her master's plate. Taking it from her, the wildcat shoved the platter under the cook's nose. "What do you call this mess of rubbish?" Wiping his paws on his greasy apron, the cook avoided eye contact with his master. "Mightiness, 'tis all we've got left. You had the Fragall take the last of the good stuff up to your chamber. I drained the wine kegs to fill a pitcher, and those scones was well stale, but they was all I had left." Trun stared around the deserted tables as the cook continued. "'Tain't worth any beast turning up here for victuals, mighty one. There ain't nothing to serve 'em. Them bark crew are to blame, I say, stealing the food out in our mouths like that. I've been mixing some mouldy flour with chopped seaweed and dandelion roots. Don't know what I'll do when that's gone, sire." Ungatzrun pushed the plate into his trembling paws. "Stop babbling and whining, cook, and keep your voice down. After tomorrow there'll be food aplenty for all. Put the word about that. This is my promise to you." It was late morn when Ungatzrun exited by a window space, high up on the mountain, and strolled up a winding path to a lookout post. His face stiffened as he glimpsed 14 figures neck-deep in the sea, ploughing their way homeward. Wordlessly, he swept past Carangul, staring in disbelief as the pitiful party stumbled out of the ocean. The blue dye had gone from their coats. Only their heads were still blue. Each had their paws bound tightly in front, and they'd been linked together at neck height by 4 long pikes, lashed 2 by 2. They collapsed on the sand. Carangoul signalled some vermin. They prized the pikes apart, slicing at the ropes that held them together. When they were freed, Rip Fang and the rest lay exhausted, rubbing their throats as they gasped in fresh air. Trun snatched the cutlass from a nearby horde beast. Carangoul averted his eyes as the wildcat honed the blade on a rock, putting a sharp, jagged edge on it. This he placed against Rip Fang's throat. "Where are the bodies of the bark crew? Where are the 150 soldiers I sent out to deal with them? Answer me truthfully, and I will spare you a slow death." Rip Fang spoke 4 words as if they were a magic spell. "I saw the badger." The sword clattered against a rock as it fell from Trun's paw. He sat down in the sand next to Rip Fang, as if pushed there by a giant paw. "Leave us. Every beast go." Carangoul, the guards nearby, Dumai and the others scattered, leaving Trun and Rip Fang together, alone on the shore. That night, Ungat Trun could not sleep. He wandered the upper passages of Salamandastron until he came to a small chamber on its north side, where he had chosen to store his own armour and weapons. His restless eyes sought out a long trident leaning against the wall. He took the weapon and hefted it. This trident had served him well many times in battle. 3 barb-headed copper prongs gleamed dully in the torchlight. He ran his paw over the oaken shaft until it met the cord-bound grip at its middle. Grasping it firmly, he went to the window and stood staring out toward the cliffs in the distance. "Brocktree of Brockhall, eh? So that's what they call you. I know you are out there somewhere, Badger Lord. But this mountain is mine by right of conquest. Here I stay. Come to me." He pointed out the window at the cliffs with his trident. Brocktree stood on the cliff tops, the night breeze ruffling his fur. He gazed at the dark shape to the south, the mountain looming high on the western shore. Drawing his sword, he pointed it at Salamandastron, starlight shimmering along the burnished blade's length. "I know your face, wildcat. Soon you will see mine. I am coming. Eulalia!" Morning sun shone down on a strange scene. Dervy and the bark crew also witnessed it, and they hastened back to the camp that Brocktree had organised as soon as he'd met up with them. Leaders of all the tribes and crews were taking breakfast inside the cave with Brocktree, about to begin a council of war, when Dervy and Conal dashed in, breathless and excited. "Come and see! All the blue bottoms are parading out along the shore." The Badger Lord shouldered his sword. "Come on, I've got to see this. Bring your weapons." Brocktree took with him a small band, Dotty and the twins among them. Using the dunes as cover and keeping low, they threaded their way south between the sandhills at the base of the cliffs. When Dervy judged they'd gone far enough, he led them west towards the shore. Dotty wriggled her way forward, joining Brocktree and Ruff in the long grass on top of a high dune. "Oh, my giddy aunt! Look at that lot!" Rank upon rank of blue horde beasts lined the beach, 20 wide and 10 deep, almost as far as the eye could see. One group had pikes, another javelins, yet another was made up of archers. There were slingers, sword beasts, and club wielders. Ruff started a hasty calculation in the sand, but he soon gave up. "'Tis no use, matey. They'd eat our little army alive." Bucko and Fleetscut crawled up beside them and lay gaping. "By the left, sir, I didn't imagine there were that many blinking vermin on earth." "Och, 'twould be plain suicide going up against yon." The Badger Lord took no notice of their comments. His eyes roved slowly over the scene below. "I don't see their leader. Ungat Trun isn't there." Dotty pointed out a figure standing at the head of a group of officers below the tide line. "I say, sir, what about that chap? He looks like a sort of commanding type, what?"
The badger lord studied the one Dotty had singled out. "He's no wildcat. Looks like a fox to me. Any beast know who he is?" Davy shaded his eyes against the sun. "That's Carangool, Captain-in-Chief of Trun's fleet." Bucko was halfway up, his eyes blazing madly. "Aye, so 'tis. Bide ye here. I'm bound to kill the scum that slaughtered my family." Brocktree and Rough bore the mountain hare down forcibly, though he struggled like a wild beast. "Ah, you can let me go, Brock. I'll deal with yon scummin' at a time." They released him and continued watching the vermin. "What are you thinking, sir?" murmured Dotty to Brock. The badger lord never took his eyes off the horde beasts. "My first thought is that Brog and the Bark crew have been doing an excellent job. Ha! That's what I was waiting for. Did you see that rat? Front rank, third column, there." "I see him. He's just fallen over. Tripped on his spear, do you think, sir?" "No, Dotty. He's fainted with hunger. Take a good look at the rank-and-file vermin, Rough. What do you see?" "Looks like they're having a pretty thin time of things. I'd say they was starving, the whole gang of 'em." Brocktree glanced back at the cliff tops. "Right, but more of that later. I think we'd best make ourselves scarce. I can see your bird hovering up yonder, Brog. He'd be flying over here to tell you that there's more vermin leaving the mountain to come along the cliff tops. The wildcat is a clever general. He wouldn't miss the chance of hitting us from behind whilst we're busy watching his troops. Let's get out of here, quickly and quietly." Later that day, Lord Brocktree addressed a meeting in the big valley between the dunes outside the old cave. Every beast fit to march or fight was in attendance. They sat on the dune sides and hilltops, listening to what their leader had to say. "We saw many vermin on the shore this morning, more than a beast could shake 10 sticks at. It was meant to be hung at Trun's show of force, though the vermin looked so thin and starved that it was more a show of weakness. But still, they are far too numerous for us to meet in open warfare. Now I have a plan." "Brr, then do 'ee tell us 'ee plans, sir. Us'n's getting awful hungered setting out yer." General laughter greeted Gert's good mole logic. Gren had food brought out by the Gausim, Drucko's rabble-hogs lending a paw. It was late afternoon by the time Brocktree finished outlining his plan, which was wholeheartedly approved. Bucko winked admiringly at the badger. "Ah, ken nu why badger lairds are braw canny beasts." Brocktree's fierce dark eyes looked appraisingly round. "Every beast here has their own special part to play. I know 'tis a perilous and risky scheme, but I think it'll work. So are you with me? Hold up your paws, all in favour." Not one creature held back. Every paw went up. No beast would have recognised Jacques the Sling. The squirrel chieftain had been dyed blue. Her tail was shaven, and she wore a horde beast uniform. Lord Brocktree nodded approvingly. "You look like a true vermin friend. Now, you know what you have to do?" "Aye, Lord. As soon as the blue bottoms leave the mountain, I will shoot a burning shaft from one of the high windows." Brocktree clasped Jacques' paw. "Good luck." Davy and Conal stepped forward with the crew. Strapped to each one's back was a torch, wrapped tightly to protect it from the seawater. Brog issued final orders. "Don't start anything until you see this fire in front of the cave lit and blazing well. Fortune go with you, mates." Brocktree looked round at those left and took Rough's paw. "Your turn now, friend. You and Brog look after yourselves. And you do likewise, Lord Brocktree of Brockhall." Dotty and Loggerlog Gren stood watching as Brog and Rough led the squirrels and rabble-hogs off into the gathering evening. They climbed the cliffs and began a long sweep south. "Ah, well, chaps, that leaves only us now. What?" observed Dotty. Bucko Big Bones exposed his teeth in a wide grin. "Aye, lassie, so what in the name of seasons are we hanging about for? Let's be a warm my bairns." Stiffener led the little army off through the dunes. "We'll get up as close to the tunnel afore dark as we can." Dotty fell in between Southpaw and Bobweave, who were simultaneously loading their slings. She could scarce suppress a shudder of excitement and apprehension.
The battle to win back Salamandastron had finally begun. With Thragold, Ripfang and Carangul scurrying in his wake, Ungat's Run raced up the stair flights, taking them in leaps and bounds. Reaching the highest level, he vaulted through a frameless window space and made his way to the high guard post. A ferret stood, pointing with his spear. "There, sire." Even from that distance the blaze was visible, lighting up the cliffside with an orange glow. The others arrived behind Srun. "You got to admit it," said Ripfang. "They ain't short of nerve. Supposed to be hiding out from you, sir. And there they be, burning a whopper campfire. Aye, and I'll wager the cooking too, stuffing the gobs with food they stole off us." Ungat's Run grabbed his captain-in-chief so hard that his claws sank into the fox's paw. "Carangul, take half of the entire horde, split them in 3 columns, one either side, cliff tops and dunes, the third to go flat out along the shore and circle round behind them. I want the leaders alive. The rest must be slaughtered. Bring the bodies back with you." Shouting broke out from a sentry post facing the sea. "Fire! Fire aboard the ships!" Out at the western edge of the vast armada, flames could be seen licking around sails and rigging. "Carangul, take some crews out there, cut the burning vessels away from the others, save the fleet." Ungat's Run beckoned to a guard. "You, gather together my captains, bring them to my chamber." In an instant, the quiet of the summer night was shattered as the entire mountain burst into a hive of activity. Ungat's Run met the group of captains in the doorway of his chamber and issued hasty instructions. "I am taking over the defense of my mountain against any outside attack. Bar all entrances. You 6, take your patrols. Bring in all outside sentries. Repel any assaults from ground level. You 4, spread your creatures about in the passages. Watch out for enemy beasts trying to break in. I'll take the top levels. Send me up 100 or more troops." Stiffener winked at Brocktree. "Nicely timed, sire. We won't even wet our paws. The tide slipped out nice and quiet. Get the lanterns ready and follow me." Dotty and the twins rounded the rock point to see Stiffener holding back a jumble of kelp and seaweed with his javelin. "Come on, you young rips, in you go. We ain't got all night." They entered the tunnel by which Stiffener and the prisoners had escaped. "I say," Dotty said, "it's jolly damp and gloomy in here. Yeek! What's that?" Brocktree pushed in ahead of them, covering Dotty's mouth with a huge paw as he investigated the grisly object. Still partially clad in tattered rags of a uniform, the skeleton of Captain Thrall gleamed white in the lantern light. Tiny spike-backed crabs scuttled hither and thither over the vermin's bare bones. Brocktree took his paw from Dotty's mouth. "Nothing to be feared of, miss. Looks like the skeleton of a stoat, if I'm not mistaken. Wonder how he got down here." It was a long, hard trek. Sometimes they had to bend almost double in the confined rock tunnel. After an interminable age of groping along through the damp rocky spaces, the boxing hare halted. "Sailors, Troby, bring those ropes here, will you?" Lord Brocktree peered through the hole at the eerie blue-lit cavern beneath, with its stalactites and stalagmites, its bottomless pool and echoing water drips. They didn't have to climb down the ropes. Lord Brocktree stayed on top and lowered them, 4 at a time, 2 to each rope. When they were all down, he lowered himself gingerly using both ropes. "There now, that wasn't too bad. Let's rest a while and eat." Jacques' heart had been pounding as she approached the main gates. Standing almost barring the way was a group of vermin and the wildcat, who was obviously Ungat's Run. Keeping her eyes straight ahead, the squirrel, hoping fervently that her disguise would not be noticed, strolled boldly forward. She passed them, and next moment she was almost bowled over by a hooded and cloaked ferret who dashed out. "Mighty one, over there by the cliffside, northward. I saw it from my window. A fire!" Jacques pulled to one side as the wildcat came bounding past, with the rest trying to keep up with him. Then she tagged on to the party. When Ungat's Run reached the high-level guard post, Jacques followed,
She saw the flames from both fires, and watched Trun giving out his commands to Ripfang, Fragall, and the tall saturnine fox called Carangool. When the vermin had hurriedly departed, Jacques ventured out. There were 3 lookout guards still at the post, a ferret and 2 rats. The ferret was obviously the most senior of the 3. He eyed Jacques suspiciously, plunging at her with his spear. "Oi, what are you doing round here?" The squirrel knew her disguise had him fooled. As the ferret adopted an officious tone, Jacques decided to brazen it out. "You got no business being up here. Who sent you?" "Hungat Trun did, and stand to attention when you speaks to me. The mighty one was right. Things are getting far too sloppy round these lookout posts." The ferret came to attention, the rats speedily following his example. Jacques circled the trio, whilst she pounded her brain to think how she could rid herself of them. She needed to be at the high guard post to fire off her signal arrow. She saw the ferret's throat bob nervously. "Let's take a look at your spear a moment." The ferret passed over his spear for inspection. Jacques studied it closely. This spearhead ain't been sharpened in a season. Do you know it's come loose? Could do with a new nail. Look." She waggled the spear haft, and the rusty nails soon snapped, leaving Jacques holding the haft in one paw and the head in her other. "See what I mean, matey? But don't fret. Sometimes a spear pole with no blade can be a useful weapon. I'll show you. You 2 rats, put down those spears and stand either side of your officer here." The sentries let Jacques shove them about until she had them outside the guard post, with their backs to the edge of the mountainside. There was a dizzying drop behind them. Jacques held the pole sideways. "When I did me spear training, my old captain showed me this trick with a spear pole. Watch and pay attention now, mates." The pole moved in a blare. Whack, whack, whack. 3 stunning blows, one to the side of each rat's head and the last to the ferret. Without a sound, the 3 guards fell backward over the edge. It was a long way down. Jacques checked that the little fire was lit in the guard post and laid out bow and quiver, selecting the shaft with the oil-soaked rags bound to its point. Touching the arrowhead to the fire, she waited a moment until it was blazing well. Then, fitting the shaft to her bowstring, Jacques turned south and fired off over the mountain top. Waiting on the tide line not too far south of Salamandastron, Brog and Ruff stood at the head of their small army. The sea otter skipper was first to see the signal arrow arcing through the night sky like a tiny comet. He pounded Ruff's back. "There she goes, mate, right on time." Ruff's answer was to throw back his head and howl, "Eulalia!" They thundered along the shoreline, paws pounding the damp sand, weapons waving, a wild, fearless band. Jacques began making her way down to the cellars. She was still on the highest level, racing along a passageway, when she ran slap-bang into Hungat Trun. They fell headlong. Jacques did the only thing she could do in the circumstances. She leapt over the wildcat and ran for it. Trun was speedily up and after her. "Guards, stop that creature! She's a spy! Stop her!" But Jacques was not about to stop. She went off down the passage with the vermin pack hard on her heels. Dotty stumbled against Southpaw. He gallantly held her upright. "Steady on, Miss Dotty. Here, take my paw." The hairmaid was glad of his assistance. "Phew, we've been blundering round down here for abso-bally-lootly ages. Do you suppose we're lost?" "Course not," said Fleetscut. "I know the flipping way out." And he was away, helter-skelter down the rock tunnels. Dotty started to run after him, but Gert stopped her. "He won't catch Zer Fleet, miss. You follow Girth. I'll get us and safe out, trust I." Far ahead, Fleetscut heard sounds coming closer. "Hello, is that them coming from the other way?" But the noises didn't resemble anything his friends would make. "Catch the spy! Stop that spy!" Then Jacques came panting up out of the gloom and collapsed beside him. "Right behind me! A load of vermin, coming fast. Where are thy friends? Are they not with thee?" "No, they're back there a ways. Should imagine they'll be along in a while." He caught sight of the yelling mob of vermin racing up the tunnel. "Great seasons!" He snapped his javelin in half and brandished the torch. "We'll have to stop 'em. Here, take this. Eulalia!" Holding a half of the double-pointed javelin apiece, they charged forward. The move took the horde beasts completely by surprise. Battering away with the lighted torch and thrusting with his piece of javelin, Fleetscut battled side by side with Jacques. Further down the tunnel, Sailors held up a paw for silence. "What was that, sir? Did you hear it?" Brocktree was already rushing by her, his blade drawn. "Battle ahead, you lazy!" They thundered along the tunnel and hit the vermin like a tidal wave. The awesome Brocktree went straight through the horde beasts. Dotty had hardly a chance to whirl a sling. Bucko shoved her to one side as he went in like a battering ram. Skulls cracked against rock as Stephen Medic and his two grandsons went in weaponless, punching and kicking. It was done in a frighteningly short time. No vermin was allowed to escape and raise the alarm. Treading carefully, Sailors led Dotty forward, clear of the carnage. On the other side of the battleground, Bucko was waiting for them. He stood up from the two forms he'd been crouching over, Jacques and Fleetscut. As she knelt by their side, Dotty could see that Jacques was already dead. Fleetscut had tight hold of the squirrel's paw and was whispering something. Dotty had to put her face close to his. "Held the tunnel. They never passed." Fleetscut smiled at Dotty. His eyelids flickered one last time, and then they closed forever. Ungatron felt the cold paw of fear traversing his spine. With no more than 100 vermin at his command, he stood inside Salamandastron, facing the barred main entrance. Outside, rocks and boulders thudded noisily against the fortified oaken doors. "Stand your ground," rapped the wildcat at his quivering vermin. "The doors will hold. This trident will take the eyes out of any beast who moves without my permission." Tron spied Bile at the hall entrance. Dashing down the hall, the wildcat cornered him. "Where's Drull and the guard patrols? I ordered you to bring them to me. Where are they?"
"How should I know?" blurted Bile. "There's a badger with a sword twice the size of me. There's an army with him, and they're coming this way fast."
Tron shouted to the horde beasts guarding the doors. "Hold your positions. Captain Bile has found Captain Drull and the guard patrols. We're going to fetch him. We'll be back soon."
"But, sire," protested Bile, "we don't know."
He froze into silence as the trident pricked his throat. "One more word, and I leave you behind with them. Now follow me up to the second level." Outside, Broggalore waved his paws furiously. "Whoa, mate, stop your rock throwing and shouting and listen." The decoy attackers left off their activities. They didn't have to strain their ears to know what was going on the other side of Salamandastron's main doors. Screams, roars, yells, and the thunder of Eulalias told them that the plan had worked. Lord Brocktree and his force had made it, up from the cellars to the entrance. Slaughter was raging unchecked against the vermin that Ungatron had deserted. On the second level, Ungatron saw driftwood and sacking from a narrow window facing east. He peeped out and saw a small band of squirrels below. The wildcat nodded, smiling at Captain Bile. "We're lucky, my friend. It's all clear. Out you go." 2 arrows took the stope before he cleared the window. Tron spoke up in a voice loud enough to be heard from below. "'Tis no use, mates. The phobie's waiting below. Round to the south side, quick. I know a good place there." He stood perfectly still and waited a short time. When he looked out again, the squirrels had run off to cover the south face. With all the litheness of a wildcat, Ungatron descended to the ground, treading contemptuously on Bile's carcass as he set off north toward the cliffs. At that moment, with a creak and a groan, the mighty doors swung inwards. Baron Drucho fell face down, still pounding with his 2 rocks at the earth in the open gateway. Girth and Bucko Big Bones poked their heads round the doors. "Welcome to mounting, sirs. Do you come in now?" They piled in regardless, ears over tails in a jumble, and the great doors slammed shut in the face of the horde crew vermin, led by Carangoul, who had just landed. Lord Brocktree put aside his battle blade. The badger's eyes were red as flame on winter's eve. He stood silent a while, striving to control the blood-wrath which coursed like wildfire through his veins. Then he held both paws wide, bowed his head, and spoke in a normal tone. "This is my mountain. Welcome to Salamandastron." Bucko Big Bones fitted an arrow to his bowstring. The shaft whizzed down, burying itself between the footpaws of the fox on the sands below. The mountain hare's voice rang out. "Good afternoon to ye. Captain Carangool, is it? I'm looking down another arrow at ye, so dinna move. Maybe you canna bring me to mind. I'm Bucko Big Bones, and I remember you weel. Aye, and there's scars on my back, so I'll nae forget ye. Ark, quit trembling, fox. I wouldna slay you wi' an arrow. 'Tis far too quick and clean, ye ken. But don't you fret noo. We'll be meeting soon. Tooth to tooth and paw to paw. You've got my sworn promise on that. Off with you now." Carangool leapt up and ran, 4 arrows zipping close by before he made the shelter of some rocks. Dotty had a scheme to dishearten the blue vermin hordes, and Lord Brocktree had given the plan his blessing. The idea was simple: to show the starving vermin that there was no shortage of food on Hareside, nor of courage and good cheer. Down on the shore, the vermin couldn't help but stare pitifully up at the happy, well-fed defenders. Ungatron and Carangool were some distance away behind the rocks, assessing their own force numbers and laying their own plans. Ripfang and Doomeye were behaving in a most undignified manner for 2 horde captains. Every time a pie crust or a scrap of cheese was tossed from the second-level windows, they joined in the wild scrabble for it. Dotty and her friends gave the impression that there was a limitless amount of food at their disposal. Loggerlog Gren even sang a song about nice things to eat, which had the vermin drooling. Gaussum cooks burned branches of aromatic herbs used in their cooking, and the scent drifted downward, adding to the foe beast's distress. Towards evening, Brocktree put in an appearance and ordered second-level openings to be closed. "Come to the dining hall. I have an announcement to make." Leaning on the hilt of his great sword, the Lord of Salamandastron waited until the hum of voices died away before explaining his plan. "They say the only way to kill a snake is to cut off its head. Ungatron's blue vermin are the snake. Here's its head. Tonight I am sending a challenge to Tron, which should settle this conflict. I will meet him, face to face, claw to paw, and tooth to fang, in combat to the death." An immediate hubbub broke out. Dotty jumped up beside the badger, silencing them in her severest manner. "Will you be quiet this instant, please? Such bad manners, behaving like a horde of vermin. Bad form." The badger lord continued. "Tomorrow at noon, I will meet Ungatron out on the shore in front of this mountain. There will be a free choice of weapons. Now, I do not expect for one moment that the wildcat will obey any rules, so to guard against any treachery, I will make my own arrangements. Dotty, will you and Stiffener see to the guard patrols for tonight? Ruff, Gren, Broggalor, Drucko, and Girth, come to my chamber." A blazing javelin whipped out of the mountain, cutting a fiery trail through the night. It buried its point in the damp sand below the tide line, extinguishing the flaming tip. Weasel Captain Bargut plucked the weapon from the sand and carried it to the rocks, where Ungatron was still in conference with Carangool. "Mightiness, this came from the mountain. I think there is a message tied to it." Carangool watched the wildcat as he scanned the parchment which had been rolled around the haft. Ungatron's shoulders began shaking, and the fox realized Ungatron was laughing, a sight no creature had ever beheld. "Everything comes to the beast who waits, eh, Carangool? Here am I, trying to think of a way to accomplish my plan, when the striped dog unwittingly solves it all for me. Come, follow me." Ruff put his eye to a crack in the wood of a window shutter, peering at the approaching shapes. The group halted within hailing distance. Sron's shout rang out from between the ranks. "I received your message, striped dog." Brocktree answered. "Well, cat, do you agree to the terms?" "How could I not agree? The one left standing takes all. But can I trust you to honor your word?" "I am a badger lord. My word is my life and honor." "Good. I am Ungatron the Conqueror. I too will pledge you my word. I will respect your terms." "Tomorrow, then. When the noon is high, we will meet there, where you stand upon the shore at this moment." Ungatron singled out his best ship and moored it at the fleet's south edge close to the shore. Closeted in the main cabin with Carangul, Ripfang and Dumai, he laid further plans. "I need an archer, the very finest bow beast, one who never misses. Is there such a creature in my hordes?" "Look ye no further, Captain," said Ripfang. "My brother Dumai can pick off a butterfly on the wing, and I'd take me oath on that." Trun's tail curled and drew Dumai close. "Here's what you must do. Climb the mountain tonight, letting no beast see you. Find a spot where you can command a good view of the combat. If the fight is going against me, kill the badger. Go now, and take your brother with you." When the pair had departed, Trun gave Carangul his instructions. "You are certain this is our fastest vessel?" "Ya Mightiness, she sails faster than wind." "Then crew this ship with your best creatures, and be ready to make sail on the noontide. If all goes wrong, I will need to get away from here with all haste. Understand?" "Mightiness, she be ready, waiting." Trun left then to go aboard his own ship and spend the remainder of the night in his more luxurious stateroom. Hidden behind some hatch covers, Ripfang and Dumai waited until the wildcat was gone. Carangul ushered them into the cabin. Ripfang's face was the picture of indignation. "So, His Mightiness has feared that it might all go wrong. We don't want to be siding with no beast who's got the idea he might be a loser." Dumai's head bobbed up and down in agreement. "You're right, Rip. Let's up anchor and get away from us all right now. Us three could sail this craft easily." Carangul preened his brush thoughtfully. "No, best we stay. If Trun be losing, you shoot the striped dog, yeah? Then you kill Trun also. Us three be lords then. We take all." Lord Brocktree of Brockhall unshouldered his great sword and strode into the sandy arena. Behind him the sea lay calm like a glittering mirror. He breathed deep and stood ready, clad only in a loose green tunic, a broad woven belt circling his waist. Totty and her friends jostled their way roughly through the blue-furred vermin. Standing at the western edge of the ring, Totty felt herself shoved to one side as Ungatron prowled into the place of combat. A tremor of apprehension ran through the hair-maid. The wildcat was a barbarous sight. His pointed ears could be seen through the slits of a round steel helmet with a spike on top and a shoulder-length fringe of fine chain mail. He wore a purple tunic topped by a copper breastplate. Above his paws were metal bracelets with spikes bristling from them. In one paw he carried the big trident, in the other a woven net edged with metal weights. Silence fell upon the packed shore, a quietness that was almost unearthly in its intensity. Lord Brocktree came to the centre of the arena. Lifting the sword level with his face, he saluted his enemy in the traditional manner of a beast about to do combat. But salutes, rules and formalities did not figure in Ungatron's nature. A screeching growl ripped from his throat and he charged. Clang! Metal struck metal as the badger met his rush. Digging in their footpaws, both beasts bent to the task of trying to push one another backwards. Both were huge male animals in their prime, well matched. Brocktree allowed himself to be thrust back a pace. Then he retaliated with a roar, sending Trun skidding across the ring, ploughing 2 furrows in the sand. Suddenly, the wildcat whipped the net about his opponent's footpaws, catching the badger unawares and crashing him to the sand. Rip! The sword came thrusting and slicing through the net meshes, its point punching a hole in Trun's breastplate. He let go of the net and danced backward. Brocktree tore the net from his body and came after his adversary, stamping down on the trident and trapping it. Flicking up the huge sword, he laid Trun's right paw bare to the bone. Trun fell down, but only to grab the net. Whirling it about his paw, he came up, battering the badger's face with the weights. Then the net enveloped Brocktree's head, followed by a pawful of sand which the wildcat flung into his eyes. Trun had no time to stab, so he hit Brocktree hard on the side of his head with the trident butt.
The badger fell heavily, blinking and trying to rip the meshes from his face. Trun raised the trident for the kill, but the badger rolled over. Folding his body into a curled-up position, Brocktree hauled sharply on the net, and Trun stumbled forward, his back bent. As he fell towards Brocktree, the badger lashed out with his uninjured footpaw, smacking it into the wildcat's nose with a sickening thud. Trun fell backwards. Brocktree struggled upright, tearing himself free of the net. From flat on his back, Trun beheld his foe bearing down on him, sword upraised. He shoved the trident out in front of him to counter the weapon's swing, and Brocktree's battle blade sheared right through one of the thick-barbed copper prongs, which zinged off skyward. Doom-Eye fitted the shaft to his bowstring. Time for the striped dog to die. But Rough was already moving. Grabbing Bucko's javelin, he kept his eyes on the vermin head he'd spotted, poking above the rocks atop the second level. One paw out straight, the other wide outstretched, balancing the weapon, the big otter did a hop-skipping sideways run right across the arena, and he let out an almighty yell as he hurled the javelin with all his strength. It whistled up through the hot summer air with breathtaking speed, and Doom-Eye fell dead on top of his brother. With a sob of horror, Ripfang heaved the body off himself and fled. Lord Brocktree towered over Trun like a giant oak. As the wildcat tried to rise, he kicked him flat again. He stamped down hard on the trident shaft. It broke with a loud crack, leaving Trun with a pawful of splinters. He tried to drag himself backwards, but Brocktree's powerful paws seized him and hauled him up until their faces were touching. Like a knell of doom, the badger's voice rang in his ears. "Now I see your face, Unga Trun. Look upon me." Trun finally looked into the eyes of his tormentor, but this time it was no vision. The terrifying nemesis of his dreams had at last become flesh and blood. One word escaped the wildcat's lips and echoed around the silent, crowded shore. "Mercy!" The next thing every beast heard was the bone-jarring snap of Unga Trun's spine as Brocktree caught him in a swift, deadly embrace. He picked up his sword, pointing with it at the huddled figure on the sand. "Cast this thing into the sea." Bumping, falling, scrambling and trampling over their comrades on the sand, vermin ran madly to the fleet of vessels moored in Salamandastran Bay. Bucko Big Bones grabbed a sword. "Yehela, my bairns! Let's send them on the way." Ripfang was already in the sea, half wading, half swimming after the stern of the lead vessel, which Carangoul had already ordered to sail. "Wait for me, Captain! 'Tis Ripfang! Wait for me!" He caught a rope trailing from the after end and hauled himself up, paw over paw. Carangoul watched the exhausted sea rat climb wearily over the rail and spit out seawater. "Huh! Some mate you are, Fox. You was going to sail off and leave me, after all the plans we'd made together, eh?" Ripfang was facing away from Carangoul, and now he could see Bucko swimming strongly after the ship. In a sudden movement, he heaved Carangoul overboard into the sea. "Why don't you go and ask him what he wants?" The days grew shorter, sunsets earlier and more crimson. The earth was turning its season from summer to autumn. Hares had come to the mountain, travelling from far corners to serve under the banner of Salamandastran's ruler, the fabled Lord Brocktree. Travellers carried abroad tales of his valour and the brave army who had defeated the evil might of Unga Trun and his blue hordes. But there were also creatures leaving the mountain to return to their homes. 10 ships from the defeated fleet had been recovered and made good and seaworthy. Broggalor took 5 of them. His crew of sea otters and their families boarded, laden with gifts for their voyage south. Then he came ashore with Dervy, Conal, and the Heron Rolango to say farewell. Dotty was embracing them when she went into floods of tears. She fought to stem them to no avail. "Oh, I say, you chaps, boo, I can't help myself." The kindly sea otter skipper gave her his kerchief. "Ha-ha, you carry on, miss. I'm used to this sort of thing, you know, what with my mum weeping and wailing." Lord Brocktree stood in the mountain's main entrance, waving with his sword, as Brog and his friends returned aboard their ship. "Farewell and fair winds, friends. Brog, you'll come back and visit, I trust." Kissing Dotty, Rough bounded past her into the water,
Ahoy, Brog, I'm coming with ye. I always wanted to learn how to be a sea otter. Lend a paw here, mates. As he was hauled aboard, Bucko Big Bones came marching out of the main gate, followed by his mountain hares. Ah, wheel Brock, there's my ships and here am I. I won't stand around weeping like a wee bairn. 'Tis after the North Mountains for me and my clan. Dotty held Bucko's paw before he boarded his vessel. I'm going to miss you pretty awfully, you know, Bucko. Wouldn't you consider staying on a few seasons? Help me to command the new long patrol that Lord Brock's forming. We'd have lots of super adventures, you and me, ranging the shores and woodlands and what-not. What? The mountain hare ruffled her ears affectionately. Och, no, lassie, I'm yearning to return to my mountains. Biting her kerchief so as not to let Bucko see her weeping, Dotty hurried back to the main entrance. Ruro was waiting for her, wearing a silver medallion about her neck. Look at the honour thy badger lord bestowed upon me. I'm to be leader of my tribe. 'Tis called a Jucker medal. It's lovely, Ruro. I won't say goodbye, 'cause your pine grove's not more than a couple of days' walk from us. We'll call and see one another often, what? Ruro signalled her tribe to move off. 'Tis a promise, Dotty. Dotty turned to Log-a-Log Gren. And you, Gren, ma'am. You and your Gowson will be on your way then, won't you? The shrew chieftain nodded, close to tears herself. Skittles came out of the mountain like a tiny boulder, knocking Dotty flat. We're going to stay on a mountain with you, and Boch. I paddle every day in the water with you, Dotty. Myrkleward took a swipe at the hog babe with a dish towel, but he scampered up onto the badger lord's sword hilt. Chopping your tail off if you do that again, mummy. Gert flicked Skittles' snout. You have respect for ye mother, little sir. I'm staying here just to keep a eye on ye villain. And as for ye, Miss Dotty, your Aunt Blench says he got to learn he cooking. Dotty ducked beneath Brocktree's paw for protection. Oh, I say, sir, how in the name of seasons is a gal supposed to be a bossess of your blinking long patrol and womp around the blooming kitchens helping Aunt Blench? What am I, patrol bossess or flippin' cook? Brocktree hid a smile as he looked down at her. The title is Patrol General, miss, not bossess. And there's a whole lifetime ahead of you, Dotty. You're still young enough to learn lots of new things. Now I see they've hauled anchors. Brog's bound south and Bucko's bound north. Striding out onto the sands, Brocktree looked about the legions of hares, sitting on the mountain terraces and perched on the shore rocks. Up on your paws now, my friends, he called. Let's give our departing comrades a real salamandastran farewell. Ready? 1, 2, and the 10 ships sailed off into the golden afternoon, with the farewell war cry gladdening the hearts of all. Eulalia! Lord Rossano finished reading and looked around the crowded dining hall, and that is how the great Lord Brocktree first came to our mountain. Thank you for listening. The audience stood and cheered the Badger Lord to the echo. They woke Rossano's young son, Snowstripe, who drifted off during his father's narrative. Is the story finished, Papa? He asked. The Badger Lord shook his head. Only a small part. One day, you and your sister will rule this mountain, and you'll find that Salamandastran's story will continue as long as there are brave badgers to rule the mountain wisely. Can you remember the lore of Badger Lords? Rossano gathered his son up, and as they mounted the stairs, Snowstripe's eyelids began to droop, but he recited the lessons he'd been taught. Defend the weak, protect both young and old, never desert your friends, give justice to all, be fearless in battle, and always ready to defend the right. Show a welcome to all of true heart who visit here in peace. Snowstripe's eyes closed as slumber claimed him, and Rossano completed the last line for his son. For this is the word of the Badger Lord and the law of Salamandastran, passed down to us from Lord Brocktree.